What's up, everybody? It's me, Joe Irostic, your friendly neighborhood pastor, coming at you live on multiple platforms today to give you a part two to a video I just did last week, a few days ago. And it's Preaching to Unbelievers Part 2. So please let me know how I'm coming through, if you can hear me okay. I've been really working on getting my technical setup. I underestimated the power of one of these kind of like boom stands for the microphone. I had no idea how much of a difference it made. And headphones. I was just kind of like old school. I had a good camera, good lighting, but I would always put the mic on the desk a little bit further away. And then I didn't use headphones. And man, it makes a world of difference. I was listening back to the video and it sounds so much more crisper. And I think that's obviously because the microphone is close to me. And then I'm hearing myself and I don't have to speak up so loud. So it's just really, really helpful. So just welcome everybody here. Share if you care. Hopefully I can do an open mic at the end with some unbelievers and have some open dialogue here. But I really wanted to take the time and explain some of the things that I didn't get a chance to do last time. I think if you watched the part 1 video, you'll see that I was being quite in depth. And then we had a Hindu visitor join with us. And I said, let me just speed this up and then I'll get to him. And then he never came on. So it's kind of like exactly what I was talking about in the video, that oftentimes debates are a waste of time if they're not, done with the right heart or the right intention. And so not to say that I couldn't have taken longer. I was just like, oh, I have a guest, a customer. Let me kind of wrap this up and get to that person. And then that person never came on. But I think it was great. It's a great video. I got some of the comments from it that people have enjoyed it. And, I'm very much self-aware of who I am and who I'm not. I'm a pastor. I'm a father of 6. I'm a husband. I love hobbies and so forth and so on. But I am not an internet personality. I'm not driven by this medium. I am not trying the medium here of media. I am not driven by it. Though I enjoy it, I'm just not driven by it. But when I do get involved in it, it kind of like sparks different interest. And so what I noticed is that as our video went forth, and give a shout out to wherever you're listening from, or just anything you'd like to let me know that's, something that's important to you while we're going throughout this. And if anything strikes, strikes a thought to you, just feel free to chat. You guys know how to do that. But what I noticed is that I just do not do well when I'm trying to present an idea like I did in the video. And then so many people come back with their ideas, and it's so far-fetched from what I'm trying to do. And so I just realized that's kind of a weakness. Like oftentimes people can just put up their videos and their content and just let it ride. So I have a channel that's called What Do You Believe? And I do ask people at the end, what do they believe? And I wanted to put this here as well for the What Do You Believe folks. Here's the skin for that. Comment below, because I care, about what people believe. I want to know what they believe. At the same time, I am not able to hear people spout off total nonsense or things that are so far from what I'm talking about, and then just let it remain, So what I noticed is that this last video that I had about the discussion about unbelievers is, unbelievers wanted to come on and really give their thoughts, and what I was noticing, man, is they're just totally missing what I'm talking about. And I'm just like, oh man, this is exactly what I was talking about in the video. So now I'm making another video. And I was like, I know sometimes I say the word like a Gen Z or an alpha here. But I was thinking to myself, do I make another video, or do I just adjust how I'm going to react to this video that I already have up? And then I said to myself, well, there are some more things that maybe I could put up in another video, and then I could go from there. And I'm just checking to make sure my sound comes through. Okay, my sound's coming through. And that's why I'm here. Okay, now, let me just say this at the very beginning. If you want a shorter, condensed version of this, listen to the first version. Listen to the very first version. And that one is on the Metro Praise YouTube, as well as my Facebook page. It is not on the What Do You Believe page. So this one is on the What Do You Believe page. But if you want the other one, go to the Joe Wyro Facebook page or the Metro Praise International YouTube. And so I stream on different I stream on with different names for different things. The What Do You Believe is like my reactionary channel. Metro Praise is my church channel. Chicago for Jesus is for evangelism and so forth. And so because this was on the Metro Praise channel, I was like, well, I got to go here and, back it up. So here is the original one, Preaching to Unbelievers, right here. So if you're not subscribed to our church channel, this is where you can see it. And you'll see that the church channel is all about church stuff. So that's why I have another channel, What Do You Believe, the one that I react to, that really makes What Do You Believe it easier for me to check in with people. What do you believe? And then I'll put in my name. Hopefully that should show up. Nope, never shows up. What Do You Believe never shows up. Let me put in my full name here. Yep, right there. So this one has about 350 subscribers. And what I do here is I react to stuff and I hear people's reaction. And as you can see, I can go from like 33 views to 12,000 views. There is like no like rhythm or rhyme with this. 39 views, 1.9 thousand views, 45 views, 300 views, etc. So you can take a look at those and the views just jump rapidly. That's why I started doing more things live, because it took so much time for me to edit. But here's like 5,000 views, 22,000 views, 4,000. And then, here's 39. So that's a lot of fun spending time doing that. So anyways, going back to what I'll be discussing today is part 2 of my presentation that I gave on Canva. So hopefully that makes sense. The full one is on the Metro Praise channel, if you're listening to the What Do You Believe channel. After I do this, let me just say this as well. I have no idea where I will go with the comments, because I cannot express to you how much I hate chat debate. And not only do I hate it, as I shared before, it is a weakness of mine to have a subject like this on a video and then to have people putting up chats of some of the most ridiculous things that had nothing to do with the video that makes me want to engage with it. It's like, lead me not into temptation, right? Deliver me from evil, Lord. And then the Bible says, if what causes you to sin, cut it off. That's why I may just cut off comments on both of these videos. And it's not because I'm afraid of what people have to say. Like I said from the beginning, 99% of the unbelievers, Lord help me, agnostics and atheists that I meet don't have any answer to these things, let alone the ability to engage them. And that's why I want to start with them before their hearts are hard and they've adopted ridiculous, redonkulous, absurd positions as rescuing devices to these things. It's not that I don't believe those people who believe those things, that 1%. And I want to be careful calling them trolls. Just, I'm talking about unbelievers. Unbelievers are going to show up. And I can't get upset about that, right? Like, that's just the way it's going to be. But when I see the kind of troll behavior, the way that they answer, I wish I wouldn't have deleted all of these. And they weren't rude. They weren't name calling. I'm just saying, like, just spamming what they think is answering my objections, which is not doing it at all. Like, it's not even close. It's like I use the example, like, I want to play the basketball game of 21 and maybe somebody wants to play horse and we just need to resolve, hey, we're going to either play 21 or I'm not playing with you because I didn't come to play horse, right? But this is not even that. It would be like me playing basketball and someone wanting to play the game where you're on a horse hitting the ball, whatever that game is called. If somebody wants to chat that in there, whatever that game is called, I feel like I'm such in a nerdy mood today. I'm even just going to look that up. What is the name of the game with a horse and a ball? What is that game called? It's like I'm trying to play basketball and polo. There we go. People are wanting to play polo. Do you understand like how different those two sports are, like basketball and polo? So I wanted to do this for myself, for those that care, the Christians who love it, share it, and don't really want to get engaged in chat debates, but you want the ammunition. This is for you. And then at the end, I will allow people to come up. I'm going to allow them to come up. I don't know how long they'll stay, but I'll give them the option to come up. I don't care. You have to understand, I have zero fear of you coming on and embarrassing me, bringing up something I don't know, but I have zero fear. The reason is because I'm going to work you through what I have here, and you will rise and fall based on what I work you through, period. And any other discussion you can have somewhere else. But we're going to play like how I was saying basketball. We're going to play 21. And if you don't want to play 21, then don't come up, because we're going to ball on you for you to see the force of it. And I do that for your benefit because I love you. But like I said, man, woo, those chats just provoke me, man. Let me just get a little relief from those chats right now. Let me put up my "What Do You Believe" pre-song right here.
Never lacking, slacking, overreacting when I be coming with my reaction. What do you believe?
Now, let me say this. When I'm talking about what do you believe, I want to know what you believe according to what I'm talking about. Not something that has nothing to do with what I'm not talking about. I want to know what you believe about what I'm talking about. Notice what I'm talking about when I bring up these slides. Okay, here they are in review quickly. Here they are, the slides for everybody to see. Okay, here are some great books to check out if you want to learn more about what I'm talking about. Stealing from God, Frank Turek, Always Ready, Greg Baunson, John Frame, Apologetics. Okay. John 18:37, Jesus said, "You are a king then," or rather, Pilate said, "You are a king then," to Jesus. Jesus then answered, "You say I'm a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world was to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." What is truth? Pilate retorted. That's what we're talking about. What is truth? How can you know what is true? I mean, that's it, guys. What is truth? I'm going to be revamping some of these slides in real time because I want you to see how I'm thinking as well, especially those who listen to the previous video. But I want you to see, man, like, if we don't have truth, we don't have anything. We have no ground to stand upon. Aletheia in Greek, that which is in accordance with reality or fact. I hold to the correspondence model of truth, okay? Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." I don't believe truth is merely mental assent. I believe truth is a person. Hence, we can know truth. People wanting to argue with me about various hypotheses over Yahweh development from Elohim, and they didn't mention it, but also I've heard the same thing dealing with the wives, and the Asher poles was Yahweh's wife, and oh my goodness, how do you even know to know that? That's what I'm talking about. I don't know why that is so hard for people to get. How do you even know what you think you know? If you don't insert God in there, please tell me how you know what you think you know. Just tell me how I'm going to be playing for. I got the receipts today. I'm going into more depth. I'm going to be reading from you, Alex Rosenburg, The Atheist Guide to Reality. I'm going to be going to Bertrand Russell in his Western Philosophical Handbook, his treatise on the matter. I'm going to be playing for you, Alex O'Connor. I'm going to be playing for you, Myth Vision, Derek from Myth Vision. I'm going to go scour the internet. I'm going to go everywhere I can to show you there is nowhere to run just from that question. How do you know what you know? I explained a little bit of my story before. This is called presuppositional apologetics. I didn't even know this was presuppositional apologetics when I held to these beliefs. You know what I'm saying? I didn't even think of it that way. I thought of it like, man, I'm just trying to explain as a Christian what makes sense to me when I see the world. If I wasn't a Christian, I would still have this same understanding as how do I even know what I know? And if I don't have an answer to that, I'm not going to pretend I know. Y'all don't even have an answer to this. And then you're telling me I'm committing the fallacy of special pleading. How do you even know what special pleading is? The fool in their folly. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. But I'm taking my time. This is a different kind of podcast. I've listened to Destiny, and those who are Christians know that he has foul language and stuff. But man, that guy will go on for 6 hours. I'm not in a hurry today. I'm going to take my time just so I can say it all. And then if I just turn off the comments, that just is what it is. But if you really want to, come back and you want to hang out and you want me to know something, email me, info@mpichurch.org. If you got something actually to say, take a time and email, because I don't even know, as I said, with my weakness, if I can handle comments coming under this thing. Well, you don't know either. And that's called special pleading. Oh my gosh. Do you not understand? I have at least put a name on the board. I've put a reason on the board. You don't even have a reason, and you're shouting out, I don't know, and you don't know either. If you don't know what a giraffe is, how do you know what I'm describing as a giraffe is not a giraffe? Do you understand how ridiculous this is? The fool in their folly. If you don't know what a giraffe is, how do you not know I'm describing a giraffe? How can you say when I'm describing a giraffe? Let's say I talk to my kids and I ask them, do you know what a giraffe is? No, Dad, I don't know what a giraffe is. Okay. And I start describing to them a giraffe. Oh, well, a giraffe is something with a long neck. Oh, that's not a giraffe. Man, you just told me you don't know what a giraffe is. I am literally asking you, how do you know what truth is? So those who may take the example of the giraffe and go, well, if I know what a dog is, and I know you're almost describing a dog to a T, I can say for sure a giraffe isn't a dog because you've told me that I'm describing a creature that's unique from dogs and cats. And so if you're saying that it has a short neck and it has little floppy ears and so forth, and I know what a dog is, then I can know that whatever you're describing to me can't be a giraffe because it sounds exactly like a dog. Granted, but that's not where I'm taking that example. Where I'm taking that example is just showing if you don't know something, how can you say that you don't know what the something is when it's being described? Now, when it comes to the knowing of truth, I am talking about for all things. So yes, if I was to say, how can you tell me you don't know what a giraffe is when you don't know what a giraffe is? You could say, well, I know other things. I'm literally saying, how do you know anything? How do you know anything? If you don't know what you know in an objective way, you cannot say to someone else claiming objectivity, I don't know what objectivity is, but I know you don't have it. If you don't know what objectivity is, you cannot claim to respond or to object to someone saying they have it. You simply have to retreat to the place of, I don't know. And if I don't know logic, I don't even know how to object to your claim of objectivity, because then I have people hearing me present objectivity and certainty, and then they say, I will now use logic to disprove your objectivity. But remember, I'm asking you how you even know logic. We're going to get there. Just got to take our time. Just got to take our time. Lord, help me. But I do have to express myself. I do got to show you the emotion behind this because it is on the level of redonkulous. And I'm going to show you redonkulousness. I'm going to show you in Myth Vision who does this kind of evidentialism against Christianity. Look what it looks like when he runs upon the wall like water against the pillar and against the buttress, the fortress of God's word. He just spills and splashes over to the side. I want to show you what it's like when Alex O'Connor, probably one of the smartest young men on the internet that's an unbeliever, what happens when he smashes up against the truth of God's word. There's nowhere left but just absurdity, insanity. There's nowhere left if you do not have Jesus as your truth. Now, if somebody wants to say to me, I am a theist, and Joe, it is not Jesus, but I agree it has to be something divine, then bring your book and bring your man or person that tells you what it is, and let's go. Now, as I've said before, I'm not waiting around for the Hindu, but I made place for him. I made time for him. The Muslims, they can go to God Logic's channel. He goes on like 3 or 4 times a week. J and DOC, Daughter of Christ. There are so many places for Muslims to go, and they'll even take on Hindus and Rabbi Eduardo, with Jews. I mean, there's a place for everybody now. I'm not that place. I'm just saying, if you think that you have something other than Jesus, in a few moments, I will let you come up, but I don't do that. That's not me. But I'm telling you, if you are not a theist, you have no right to say it can't be Jesus because of X, Y, and Z reasons. It can't be, because you don't have objectivity. I'm going to show you in pretty pictures here in just a moment, but I hope everybody sees this. Does everybody get this slide right here? I'm asking, what is the one thing that has to be the starting place of all existence and knowledge? That's what I'm asking. That's what I'm asking. I don't care about anything else. You have to understand this. It's a beautiful day in Chicago. I'm taking my kids to the skate park after this. If my wake park opens up, I love wakeboarding, I'll go there. Yesterday, I got to do 2 in 1. Kids to the skate park, then go wakeboarding. You have to understand, I love people, but I don't love the genre of internet-style chat debate. I would rather shave my head. This is what I am asking. Can you all read this? Can you read this? The Bible says an open rebuke is better than hidden love. I am speaking to the fool in their folly right now. Can you read this? This is what I am asking. I don't care about anything else. I'm going to come out and be very clear with you. I don't care what you have to say. I don't care. I have books here about people who do care. About the Jehovah, Elohim, priestly, Deuteronomy class, the JEPD theory. I have books behind me here that describe Christian history and how it wasn't sabotaged by Constantine, and though that's been a myth that's been purported throughout the years. I have books here debunking myth about Jesus. Jesus was just, I have all this. I'm not them. Anybody watching this, I almost just want to just leave the chat open so you all can just see the ridiculousness of people who don't even know how to read. Do you understand? I'm saying to you, I don't care about your chat. I live by this rule. You don't see me going to Aaron Ra's page, to Matt Dillahunty's page, and provoking stuff with them because I don't care about what they have to say. Why would you care? As an atheist / agnostic, why would you care to put your opinions underneath this chat when I've told you in the video, I don't care what you have to say if it's not what I am on? Go back to my example of basketball. Here I am balling. I'm balling. And you're like, hey, man, do you want to play horse? No, I don't want to play horse. But I will play you in 21. Well, all I play is horse. Good. Go over there and play horse. I don't owe you a game of horse on the court. Well, I'll beat him in horse. He knows who cares? The guy has told you, I don't play horse. You want to come play 21? Come play 21. I look at the world of the internet trolls and I'm like, what are y'all doing? I know in some way you got a little hype in the early 2000s, you were making progress, but man, your progress has faded away into absolute insanity. Now you see Dawkins arguing, as I've done with Ayaan Hirsi Ali, how she's showing him the truth. And I react to this, and all he has is mockery. And that's one of your own because it's a bankrupt system. And yet you want to argue with me about horse being a better game. I don't listen to me. Listen to me one more time, my friends, who I love in Christ. I don't care if you think it's a better game. I don't care what you think. Maybe a lot of you are from a generation now where you're so soft, everybody has to care what you think. I want to be very honest with you. I don't care what you think. Because to me, if you cannot answer that question, you don't even get into the door of the discussion. And that's what I was doing in my first video. And that's why I'm more intense in this first video, is I'm showing you that we as Christians have been putting up with your redonkulousness for so long. We've given you somewhat like of a platform to spew this stuff, and then we're put on the defense over and over and over again. Like, explain to me that Jesus is not a myth according to the zeitgeist video. Explain to me that Jesus in the Bible is the real version and not Bart Ehrman, how Jesus became God. Explain this to me. And then you just got us tap dancing, tap dancing. Like, you put the quarter in the jukebox and we just tap dancing. We just tap dancing the whole. I'm not your tap dancing street performer. I don't care how many quarters you drop in the bucket. I'm not a street performer. We as Christians, bold Christians who see signs, wonders, miracles, those of us who are baptizing your folks, I'm seeing your folks converted. I can't even think of maybe one or two out of my church who has left and gone to agnosticism, atheism, but I've seen many, many come from that. I'm seeing your worldview get rocked every time I go out. Every time I go out. Because on the streets, they recognize absurdity. They haven't gone to Alex O'Connor to believe in mereological nihilism, which is your cope. Your cope to these things is that the property of a universe is that it can be eternal and come out of and start itself. That's a property you have to ascribe to it as a cope. Man, we ain't coping. I understand there's Christians debating with atheists and online and all this. And the reason why we do it is because we believe your soul is lost. You don't even think we have souls. Why are you wasting your time then? It shows that I shouldn't even engage with you because you now are just a creature of instinct. You're merely acting on your chemicals because you don't even acknowledge free will. And as we'll get into some of the goodies here, because I said I'm not in a hurry today, we'll see how even your best puts you in your place, shame you, and show you the ridiculousness of your worldview. That's what we'll see. Amen. Because they are either with God or against him. In this case, they're working on the side of Satan. That's it. Because they have nothing else to do except to do this. It's like God doesn't exist, but I hate him. By you asserting so much time and effort to Christian posts and the Christian videos like mine, it shows that you are convicted. I know you'll do it towards other religions as well, but it just shows, man, like you can't let it go. I don't mess with Santa Claus. I don't run up on Santa Claus. I don't make my life about Santa Claus. Santa Claus means nothing to me. And if I was in your position and I actually lived by that worldview, Christians would mean nothing to me. They would mean absolutely nothing to me. I would go on the internet, look at porn, watch my favorite stuff. I wouldn't care. And then once again, the only reason why now you can even say that, you as an atheist would care about that stuff, is because your chemicals make you do that. You're doing it like the fly goes to manure. You can't help yourself. And I, as a bee, could not convince you that honey, or nectar rather, is better than manure. I couldn't do it because by your nature, you're a fly wanting that manure. That's by your own nature. That's what you is. You is what you is, and you can't be anything else. You like your manure. Like it. And so I wouldn't mess with you in your manure and try to convince you. Why do I do this? Why do I do this? Because I do believe in free will. I do believe in choice. I do believe you're made in the image of God and there's something better than manure. Let me put on my fan as I get worked up here. Give me just a moment. All right. It's not just going to be preachy. It's going to be information. Let's go. Okay. That's my question. That's it. What is the one starting place that has to be, or the one thing that has to be the starting place for all existence and knowledge? I put God there. What are you going to put there? You say, I don't know. Well, then the discussion's over. Take a seat and learn. You say you don't know, take a seat and learn. You can ask questions, but you don't have the right to debate me on what a giraffe is if you've never seen one and I have. You can try to use logic to disprove what I'm saying, but you haven't given me an explanation for logic. So trust me right now because I got an explanation. Let's go on that for a little bit. Let's try that for a little bit. But to debate with you when you have nothing and you're going to attack this something, it's a fool in his folly. How do I know my something is true? Logical necessity and personal experience. If God cannot contradict himself and God cannot lie, that means the God of the Bible will be shown to be true with those principles. A theist can debate another theist on their version of God. An atheist cannot do that. This is what I don't understand. Do you all not know how to read? If you have not answered this question, how can you now argue with me and go, I know for sure. I know for sure by logic, it's not the God of the Bible because the God of the Bible did this to the Canaanites. And then the God of the Bible can be shown in Near Eastern history to be this. And then with the Canaanite God of this and then of this. And you don't get there yet. You have nowhere to go at this point to argue with this point. You don't even know what logical necessity is in your worldview. You're not even a person in your worldview to even have personal experience. This is why I think maybe I raised my voice a little bit. You know, it's kind of like in my house growing up. Oh, you didn't hear me? Let me see if you hear me now. The first video was more chill. It's more like college class. This is more like preachy. Because I got people already coming under the post, like acting like you watch the video and then they go timestamps and they're answering it. And once again, I have nothing against you. I love you. And then you're not even understanding what I'm talking about. Can you not read what it says? It's impossible, if it's a logical necessity, it's impossible for anything else to be that one thing. What I am saying is it's impossible, the impossibility of the contrary, to be anything else other than God. And you can't argue against that in my worldview without you asserting first something that grounds your logic. So now we're going to debate the logic of God. Let's debate the logic of the Christian God. Let's see if the Christian God is really logical. Let's go. Okay. We could do that with a Muslim. I can do that with a Hindu. I can do that maybe with a Buddhist if they want to stretch it far enough to a personal God. Okay, I can't do that with you. Unbelievers, listen to me. You sassy know-it-all. You want to be know-it-alls. Listen to me. I can't do that with you because by doing that with you, I have already conceded that you have something to stand on. Well, let's argue now the logical necessity of Jesus in the Bible. Where did you get logic from? You spiritual nincompoop. In the world of spirituality, you are a nincompoop. You are a fool. I don't like being called a fool. I don't care. The Bible calls you one. But like Mr. T, I pity the fool. Well, this is not really Christ-like. Man, most people here would not even understand Christ if they met him. Who do you think Jesus was calling fools? People like yourself, people in the religious world, people all throughout the Old Testament, Jesus was calling fools. Friends, you're either wise or you're a fool. I don't say that to be angry or think I'm better than you. I'm a fool without Christ. All of us are. The only difference is I have admitted my folly. I have admitted that without Christ, I am a fool. Let me just show you this. How to answer the two kinds of fools. Okay. I've shared this in the last post. Last video, rather. Okay. Let me just put it up here. Chat always helping. Okay. Love chat. Chat helps. Okay. Watch this. According to the Bible, Proverbs 26:4, do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be like him. Sometimes it is best not to engage with a fool because their arguments or behavior are irrational. I know you all can get this. I know you're smart enough to understand this. according to my conviction, this may not be your conviction. I don't care if it's your conviction or not. This is my conviction. There is a point where unbelievers go, especially online, where it is so irrational. There's no more point in having the discussion. There's a point with flat earthers, you just can't talk to them anymore. Conspiracy theorists, there's just no other way to talk to them anymore. For me, I can't talk to you and go on with you and engage you as the fool that I am supposed to answer, unless you think you're wise in your own eyes, unless you can get out of a little bit of your absurdity, unless you can get out of a little bit of your irrationality. Now, you may say the same thing to me. Joe, I heard the first 5 minutes of your video and I'm done. Okay, great. God bless you. Hope to see you in heaven. Repent of your sins. Be born again. And then people like to say, oh, there's no love. There's no hate like Christian love. Like we're hating on you when we say we love you because it's like a dig towards your repentance and hell. Man, this is what we believe. This is what we believe. I believe you have a soul, and that if that soul does not repent and go to Christ for reconciliation, you're going to hell. What don't you understand about that? That means I love you if I tell you where your soul's going. You may not like that God. You may want to argue with that God. You may not think anything positive about that God, but I don't care. That's not what I believe. So I'm not hating you when I actually tell you the gospel, but that's how you have to twist it in this generation to now even make gospel preaching out to be hate. And by the way, that's the same thing they did back when they persecuted us in the Roman Empire. You're going to find your way to keep persecuting Christians because that's what you want to do. That's what's in your heart. That's what you want to do. Now, going back to the video here, to my presentation, we know that God, especially the God of the Bible, is that one thing because of logical necessity. Once you admit that there has to be something like God to give us everything that we have, now you test that God by those principles. You have the God of the Bible remaining. No one else remains. And then if you believe in personal experience, that things can happen in your soul and in your heart. Jesus shows up every time. And for the deconverted, you're just backsliders, man. I've been a backslider. I was one. I was raised as a Christian, and then I backslid. I know exactly what it's like to be a backslider. So you're not like sometimes they come out, I used to be a Christian. I was so this, and now I'm this. You can take me at my word. Dude, listen, I used to be just like you. So take me at my word. I came back. I slid back. So now mine trumps yours. Your experience. Well, I'm so experienced in Christianity and I walked away. So that must mean it's so valid. My testimony is so valid because I used to be just like you. And now look at me. I'm just looking at you going, what flavor of dog puke did you want? What flavor was it? You wanted the dog puke of every lifestyle is accepted, and it just bothered you that certain people go to hell because of their lifestyles, and now you want to be free from that kind of feeling of grieving over the world. You just want to accept the world now. What kind of dog puke did you want? Did you like your own sin, your own addictions? Did you like the idol of your mind? You want ideas. You don't want anybody to tell you anything. You would rather reign in hell than serve in heaven. What was your dog puke? What did you go back for? You ain't going to convince me of dog puke going back there. Joe, go back to believing the way you used to believe, that the world was just energy, a force. There was no personal God. Get high, do drugs, do whatever, or go be a smart person, in the worldly sense and make money. Whatever you think I should go and do. Tell me what you think I should do as aside from being a Christian. Well, go be a great dad. Go be all that. Man, you think that's anything in the world of dust? You are so foolish. What could I just break? I can't wait to break Alex Rosenburg all over your behind. Take it and just take your whooping of Alex Rosenburg. You're going to tell me that you know of a better way for me to live from a Christian to a non-Christian? Well, it's better to live with more things that are true than not true. None of it matters. If what you are ultimately saying, not one thing matters. Not Hitler, not Mother Teresa, not being awesome, not the psychopath. None of it matters. Not according to me, according to the atheists. And then they're going to argue with each other. I saw Alex O'Connor arguing with an atheist, but I believe in moral objectivity. It's ridiculous. You got moral objectivity from dust and chemicals in your brain that came from a universe that its property is to come from nothing. You know, I mean, what are we doing here? Or it can start itself. What are we doing here, folks? Yeah, you're talking about this reminds you of Lee Strobel. I know Lee Strobel's story. For them, Lee Strobel's basic. I love Lee Strobel. I think he makes it very simple for all of us, and it's a good starting place. Evidence that demands a verdict, Josh McDowell, the case for Christ, and so forth. These are great stories. I love sharing them while I preach. But Steve, the kind of people I'm talking to, they don't care about stuff like that, and they'll just give a deconversion story to kind of even it up. So Lee Strobel found out this, the evidence for the resurrection, but now this person like Bart Ehrman started with the belief of the resurrection, then he went to Moody Bible College and so forth, and then he denied it. So they'll just try to trip you up with somebody else's story. I don't care. Listen to me. Even if the whole world was full of Lee Strobels or the whole world was full of atheists, I don't care either way. Let God be true and every man a liar. In my book, God destroyed the world and saved 8 people. That's the kind of world we're living in. Now, you'll think that's cool when science does it, or science describes it when some planet has a heat death or something, goes over here and runs out of energy or blows up or hits a star, or he gets hit by a meteor. You'll understand that stuff happens, but then when my God does it, you're going to call it evil. But you don't even know what evil is. You don't even have a definition of evil. The fool has no definition of evil, yet want to call people out for being evil. Just a few more moments. I'm still in the review. Like I said today, I'm not in a hurry. I'm going to say it all. I'm going to say as much as the Lord puts on my heart, and I will not be in a hurry. Read this post right here. Every one of you atheists, every one of you unbelievers, every one of you who thinks you're going to say something on my post that's going to get me to think differently about you. Let me just explain to you right now what I think about you when you don't answer these questions and you come here. This is what I want you to put this in your mind. Let me get this out of here. I want everybody to see this. This is what I think about you. Do you know how you think about me right now? Think about how you think about me right now. You atheists that want to now go and put stuff on my post and talk about Jesus myth and all that. Think about how you think, how stupid I am. Think about how you just have no respect for any argument I've set up until this point. Think about how right now you hold me in your mind. You have zero regard for my doctorate degree. You have zero care for all the studying. You have zero care. Now, I want you to think about that. And you want to know how I think about you? Take that and put it to a number and times it by 1,000. And that's what I think about you. Think about how stupid you think I am right now. Just be honest with yourself, man. He is so stupid on a scale of 1 to 10. He's an 11. This man is dumb. Think about what you think about my argument right now. Think about what you think about my argument. Scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most stupidest thing you've ever heard. You consider it a 10. I want you now to multiply that number. You're like, man, I can't even imagine how stupid that person would possibly think I am after multiplying. Yes, multiply that number. And you will be getting close. You will be getting close to how I think about what you're going to put in that chat. What you put in that chat means less to me than my aunt in the backyard thinks about what I'm doing right now. Think about it. Just let that set in your mind for a minute. Because for some reason, we think that what we think about others means something. Oh, if it meant so little, why are you doing this? Because I love you and I want you to hear this. I want you to hear this. I don't want to hear what you have to say outside of what this is, but I want you to hear this. This is not 50-50. This is not let's go back and forth. No, this is either you get on the court and play 21 or I don't care about what you're doing. I don't care. I don't care what you believe. I don't care what you think. You have to understand. See, this is one of the things that some Christians have just messed with you too much. Because we love you, you think we love what you believe. We hate what you believe. We don't care about what you believe. We love the sin I love the sinner and hate the sin. I hate homosexuality. I hate rebellion. I hate perversion. I hate greed. And not only do I hate it when I see it in your life, I hate the me I see in you. I hate it in me. We as Christians have taken up our crosses. Think about what we have done as Christians. I don't know if you've met a real one, but you've met one now. The first thing we did when we came into this thing was deny ourselves. Take up our cross and follow Jesus. Do you think if I denied myself, the one that I love more than anybody else, the one that I got to sleep and eat with and listen to every day, you think if I denied myself, I'm going to listen to you? You think if I've got to put my fleshly desires on the cross, you think I'm going to be drawn in by your fleshly desires? You don't even know my flavor of sin. And you think I'm going to get drawn in by your flavor of sin? No, that's what I was saying at the beginning. My biggest weakness is just wasting my time with y'all. Just wasting my time. Answering back this objection. And we haven't even described where logic even came from. We don't have any reason to even trust it in your worldview. This is the slide I'm asking you to answer. 4 questions. Number 1, why is there something rather than nothing? And because that got confusing to some of you, I get it. I can be confused. Man, I want to be very clear with you right now. Do not ever think to yourself that because I'm doing this, I think I'm smarter than y'all when it comes to IQ tests and stuff. No, not at all. I'm not trying to do that. I'm not trying to do that. That is not at all what I'm trying to say. Not only can you run probably laps around me, not only could your professor run laps around me, but I'm talking about high schoolers. My brain doesn't function like an academic. Going to school and getting an academic degree from my associates to my bachelor's to the master's in religious education that I have, and then my doctorate in ministry. I have a D-Min. I had to fight all along the way to understand these books. I had to spend my time with them. I had to research them. That's why do you think I always have chat open up? And before I would do these live cats, I'll just have books piled up because I don't even want to say something that I presume is true about somebody else without having it there because I get it mixed up. I forget sometimes. Now, don't let that weakness fool you. Michael Jordan might have been a horrible, horrible historian of basketball. Michael Jordan might have been a horrible student of physics and understanding how the basketball bounces and can be tossed into a metal rim. Horrible. I don't know. I don't want to speak on him like that, but I'm just saying for the sake of example, he could have been horrible at recalling who was the first one that invented basketball. Came from a Christian, by the way, YMCA. Who was the first guy's name? What year was that? How did it get popularized? What was the first year that the African Americans could get integrated? What was the first year of the NBA? Man, he might have been horrible at that. He might have been horrible at understanding if you were to put him in a physics class. Now, Michael Jordan, we want to show you that when you bounce the ball like this, and the reason why it does this is because of these laws, and this is why it does this, and when you do this, it does that, and then that's why sometimes it sticks to your hand, and you can't double dribble, but you'll feel the momentum of it on your hand. You know what I'm saying? But you get on the court. Listen to me. You get on the court with Michael Jordan, you're going to find out real quick that none of that matters when it comes to the game of basketball. You could be the biggest nerd of physics. You could explain things to make Michael Jordan's head spin about what was going on. You step on that court, you're going to find out real quick what it means to play basketball is a lot different than the physics of basketball. And what I'm asking you to do, unbelievers, is play life. Man, I got so many Christian philosophers that I look up to. They confuse me too. But I have to go back over them 100 different times to get it before I'm unconfused. William Lane Craig, and B theory of time and A theory of time. And you want to tell me that's easy, man? Man, for somebody it might be, but I guarantee even those here, it's not easy. Understanding the differences of Platonism, understanding the world of forms, and come on, let's be honest. There's only a few people that go on that level. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you're not smart enough and more skilled than I am in bringing it down to where we can play the game of basketball, I don't give a rip what it means. You still in basic training camp. Go get your skill and answer these questions. Go get whatever you need from the worldly academic system, and then come bring your behind over here, and let's see if you can take the first step. Come bring your behind over here, because once we get here, we're not talking about the physics of basketball anymore. Once we come here, we are not talking about the history of basketball. When you come here, we are now playing basketball. We're playing it. Not talking about it. We're playing it now. I don't want to hear about your favorite philosopher. I don't want to hear about how you think this and think that and how this said that. I don't care about any of it. Put your 10 toes on it and start stepping. Tell me it can hold you. Show me that it has the ability to bear the weight of the questions that I'm asking. And then that's where they go, oh, these are just foolish questions. That's what Ricky Gervais said. Oh, that's just a foolish question. Where did the universe come from? Those are just stupid questions. All right, good. Then leave us alone then. Go to hell if you want. Highway to hell. You're going to get there and you're going to find out what it's like. You go there if you want. I'm talking to people. You really want to engage with me as a Christian? Answer this question. Why is there something rather than nothing? And then since people have been bringing up, yes, that nothing isn't in and of itself a contradiction. There cannot be a no thing. The idea comes back from the philosophers who use that. So I'm using their terms. But I will be more specific so that there's no confusion. We get lost here. Listen to what I'm asking here. Why is there this something rather than another something? Oh, it just is what it is. Well, then God is what it is. End of discussion. Next. That's why I wish I could just have 100 atheists lined up on a call, and I would just be like, next. I love how God logic does it with atheists. I mean, with Muslims. You just need to be humbled sometimes. He's saying, your book, your Quran, says that Muhammad is mentioned in the Gospels. Show me where it's at. Well, your Bible's been corrupted. Delete. Next. Oh, well, we know that Paul preached a false gospel and changed Christianity. Next. Your book, what don't you understand about this, he says. What don't you understand? Your Quran, your book says your prophet, Ahmed, by the name of Ahmed, is found in our Gospels. Now put it up or shut up. Don't want to talk textual criticism. Don't want to talk about how Paul changed things. Your book said he was found in our book. Well, you changed your book. No, it didn't say it changed the book. It said in their Gospels, in their Injil. That's what I'm asking. Does everybody get that? Everybody get it? Why is there this something rather than another something? That's it. Why are you a thinking observer? Let's go to the next one. What it is, what it is. Okay. All right. You're going to ascribe qualities to the universe that I give to God. Okay, that's cool. You guys say God's eternal. We're going to say the universe is eternal. You're going to say God has a mind. I'm going to believe in panpsychism, that everything has a conscious and psychological ability. Oh, okay. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, I let you do that. Now, number two, why are you a thinking observer? According to Alex Rosenburg, you're not even a thinking observer. Number three, why does logic and science work? Why is what's going on in our brain corresponding to what's going on in the world today? And then number four, why be truthful? Why be moral in this discussion? Okay. Now, I have some different points that I can bring up here that I didn't bring up last time, but I just want to show this quickly, and then I want to move on. Now, notice this here. With those 4 questions, you now have 3 options. What button do you want to push? Number 1, do you want to concede? As an unbeliever, I will concede that I do not have answers to the 4 foundational questions, and therefore will not debate, but will humbly ask questions about the Christian answers. That's an option for you. Option number 2 is I will answer the 4 questions that I believe in, not in a hypothetical way. Well, I'm going to try the flying spaghetti. No. You're going to answer them in the way that you believe with as much certainty as you can have. These are your objective truths. And you will attempt to show their validity over the Christian answers. So now we're going to go back and forth between what the God of the Bible talks about to whatever you're talking about. Or number 3, you can leave the discussion because you don't have answers to the questions pertaining to the Christian worldview or your worldview. You don't have answers to give for your worldview, rather, and you don't want to humbly ask questions without a debate concerning Christianity. Those are your 3 options when you're dealing with me. Do you see where I'm coming from? That's where I'm coming from. If not, go and get. Number 1, concede. Man, I don't have any idea to any of these things. What are your answers, Christian? I'll listen. And if you're assuming that I'm right for the sake of argument, then now you're listening to me. You're not doing what they call an internal critique. No. This is I saw some Christians debating these other atheists, Kip and all of them on an internal critique, Gavin Ortlund on the Canaanites. Man, I wouldn't even have had that. I thank God they did, Trent Horn and Gavin Ortlund on the internal critique of the Canaanites after O'Connor interviewed Craig. Yeah, I appreciate that. But man, you don't even get the permission. Bad atheist. Even bad Christian there. You don't even get the permission to do an internal critique because internal critique assumes the validity of the position and that then you can make value statements on how that position upholds to its own criteria. How do I know that you know how to make value statements? Oh, I'm going to make a value statement on the internal critique of Christianity. Man, how do your chemicals know how to do that? Well, I'm going to assume your position is true to now make my value statements. We don't care about your value statements. We don't care about your value. As a Christian, I don't care about your value statements. Notice this right here. Notice this right here. What do you value? Okay. And I'm just going to do this in real time with you. It's funny. Some of the Christians, one woman said, I had my homeschoolers watch this, or I had my youth group watch this. And now she might be like, oh my gosh, I don't want anybody to watch this. This is scary. Christians, we love you. But sometimes, and I'm not saying they would say this. I'm just, saying that Christians, I love you, but sometimes you guys are too soft on the world. But you do you as a Christian. I don't mean you do you like however you want. I'm just saying like you answer the fool according to their folly as the Lord tells you, right? But I do appreciate that she shared it with her youth group. I really do. I think more youth need to know this. Option A, or what is this called? Value A. Value A. Value B, right? And it can be anything underneath there. It doesn't matter. How do I know you know how to, you don't even see this. How do I know that you even know how to make value statements without an absolute truth or a guidance to truth? That's why you can't do an internal critique. Do you know that everything you're choosing along the path of what you value as an atheist is simply matter in motion? There is no actual value to anything you're choosing other than the fact that your matter chose it. It's not logical. It's not illogical. It's not right. It is not wrong. It is simply whatever your chemicals, your dust has chosen. Okay. Now, because at this point, I've pretty much gone through the review and I could go, let me just finish out the buttons. Let me finish out the buttons here, right? Let me put it back here. So no, we don't care about your value statements until you give me a reason to why you value. Why should value anything you value? Okay. If X, then Y. X is true, therefore Y. If a consistent and universal set of rules, standards like logic, morality, and science exist, that's X, then universal, unchanging standards found in God must exist to ground them. If you can't say, if you don't believe in God, give me what your Y is. I don't care about anything else. I'm just saying that again. Maybe you should take some water, stay hydrated. Every time I say I don't care about what you think other than this, right? I do care about it. If you have an answer for this, I would love to hear it. I'd love to hear it if it's other than God. Please tell me. Premise number 2. A consistent and universal set of rules and standards like logic, morality, and science do exist and are observed in our world, X. Conclusion, therefore, Y. Because these things exist, therefore, God must exist to ground them. So just understand how this works. If and then. This then happens because there's an if, okay? So if there are morals, then there's God. If there are morals, there's God. Now, if you want to debate whether or not there are morals, whether or not there are universal laws, then there's no debate to be had after you've told me I want to debate logic, because then what are we going to debate it by? But if you agree that there's logic, if you agree that there's morals, then the if-then statement has been validated. If there is morals, then there's God. There are morals. There are logical rules, laws. There are applicability of science in the real world, demonstration of that. Therefore, God. If, then. Now, X is true. It defends the if, then of the previous statements. If X is true, and X is true. I don't want to debate with somebody who doesn't believe in logic. I don't want to debate with somebody who doesn't think that morality exists, because although I know they're going to be truthful with me. And that's why I try to share with you every time someone points to science and go, oh, it's all about the science. Science is not about certainty, my friends. The very expression, this is Dr. Carlo Rovelli from the New Republic article he wrote on scientific certainty. And, I don't really feel like reading the whole thing, but it would be good for some people to read the whole thing, because I guarantee you, most people have not thought about it in this way. Now, I should be able to click on this link. That's why I put that link there. It's right there. Let's try it again here. You can see my little mouse turns into a finger. See, look, it goes away from the finger. Click on that right there. There we go. Okay. Oh, you're not going to be able to see that unless I'm just sharing screen. Okay. Let me, this might be easier if I just share my entire screen over here. Okay. Okay, now notice this. Science is not about certainty. The separation of science and humanity is relatively new and detrimental to both. I mean, I just don't have time to read this whole thing. You see, it began to bother him that, first of all, there hasn't been major success in theoretical physics in the last few decades. So he's just being real and honest about that. Okay. Now, he's not saying that we can't do science and that it doesn't serve a purpose. But what he's basically saying, let me get towards it here, is if this is so, then the idea that we have data and theories, and then we have a rational agent who constructs theories from the data using his rationality, his mind, his intelligence, his conceptual structure, doesn't make any sense, because what's being challenged at every step is not the theory, it's the conceptual structure used in constructing the theory. I mean, this, guys, do you even understand what he's saying? It's the conceptual structure used in constructing the theory and interpreting the data. In other words, it's not by changing theories that we go ahead but by changing the way we think about the world. Like, it's not just thinking about the very things that we've said we've thought about. It's like, why are we thinking? Okay, and now because I'm not in a hurry, let me go here to, I believe this one person put it up under a title here. And you know what? I'm going to have to come out of this because it's not going to share my my audio. That's why I don't generally like to share the desktop, because then the audio will not be shared. Okay, and then I can share also the audio here. Okay, let me put up here. Atheist behind closed doors. I didn't have this one ready. I have a bunch of other ones ready. I don't want shorts. I want videos. Consciousness. Yeah, I'm not in a hurry, so I just got to take my time. Atheists behind closed doors. Consciousness. Oh, I got to find this now. Because what's his name was Daniel Dennett was there. Let me put it here. Dennett, Rosenburg. Dennett and Rosenburg, the problems with consciousness. Yeah. Is this where he's at? Free will. Okay, let's see.
Get the story.
Yep. Okay. This is Sean Carroll. You guys know Sean Carroll. You know what I'm saying? Come on now. Let's just first of all just stop for a second here. If you're still following me as an atheist, maybe you're just wanting a good chuckle or something. I don't know. But if you're still here as an unbeliever, I want you just to think about this. This pastor that I'm talking about myself, that pastors a church that you think were Oompa Loompas. Do you notice just how quickly I just found this and I understand this discussion? The best of the best are sitting at this table. Do you understand, like, we as pastors are not the Oompa Loompas that you maybe went to church with when maybe you were in your 80s or 90s, in the 80s or 90s or whatever, or you grew up thinking. Now, I understand I still may be rare among my peers, but do you see just how easily I navigate? And I talk about this debate as if we talk about sports, because I don't watch sports. I watch debates. Okay, so do you understand there is nothing, no thing you are bringing to me that I haven't already heard from your daddy? I've already talked with your daddy. I've already talked with them in this way. You get my point? I've already talked with your daddy. And I'm saying your daddy is reduced to absurdity. I'm saying your daddy's daddy, Hume, Russell, they are reduced to absurdity. And they know it. The emperor has no clothes. Okay? Now, I'm going to go back and forth between this and Rosenberg's book to show you that they don't even get the contradiction yet to the point to where they humble themselves before the Almighty God. They will talk about themselves as if they are persons while denying themselves as persons. Especially Alex Rosenberg is the biggest hypocrite in this room right now. Okay, can't go there yet. Thank you. I feel the check of the Holy Spirit. You guys can call that whatever you want, but I believe it's the check of the Holy Spirit. Let me just go here before we go there. Let me do this. Now, I want you to understand that there's different things that float around the internet. Okay. And of course, Christians share ideas, atheists share ideas, like everybody's sharing ideas. I just want to let you know about myself. Most of the ideas, most of the things that I'm sharing here are similar to others, but have not been arrived at the way the others arrived them. Like, in other words, I love Greg Bonson, but I haven't even finished his entire book. I love Van Til in some ways, whatever. I don't even read all of their books. I get them a lot of times for like confirmation. And then I get the other books that I disagree with, like this, to make sure I'm right, because I don't want to just be spending my whole entire time just listening to like Alvin Plantinga and William Lane Craig. I hardly ever listen to them, right? Because I already know we're basically saying the same thing. And so I build my ideas off what I'm getting from how others, the outsiders, are answering them through discussions that I'm going to show you, or through their own books. So it's not that I'm not similar to like Alvin Plantinga and properly basic beliefs, or to William Lane Craig and to the what we would call like the cumulative case and so forth. It's not that I'll argue like that depending on who I'm talking to, if it's a fruitful conversation and it helps. Okay. But I'm not saying I base my apologetic off of their works. I am just being honest here. I base it off of my study and my time on the streets, meeting the 99% of unbelievers that I talk to, not the ones on the internet that just continually adopt copes and go out of their way to try to mock Christianity while themselves sitting in their own dung like a fly, not understanding there's nectar over here. Okay. So to help you understand, I never had heard of Alex Rosenburg, and I heard of him first through debating William Lane Craig. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. There's no way this guy's book is this contradictory. Like, he says there's no I, and then he says I. Like, I remember somebody asking that question in the debate. Like, you have to understand, I'm just, just like anybody else, just chilling. Oh, William Lane Craig's debating another person. Okay, I'm going to listen to that. That's cool. Okay, what's going on here? Okay, well, you wrote in your book that the I doesn't exist, but you use the word I throughout your book like 500 times or something, and I'm like, what? You mean to tell me this guy denies that he even exists as an I, as a person, and then yet he uses the word I all throughout his book? Yeah, and I had to get his book. And it's the same thing as we're going to show about Bertrand Russell a little bit. The first time I was introduced to Bertrand Russell, Why I'm Not a Christian, was when I was witnessing, like I said, to atheists, agnostics on the street. I meet them all the time, but I've never met them as dense and as unworkable as people on the online troll community. I've never met them as dense. And I'm not saying every atheist, I'm not trying to, wrongly categorize and speak about everybody in this way. But even in our scriptures, it says you could talk in general terms. All Cretans are liars in Titus, it says. But I met him and he said, let me tell you about this. This guy wrote this book and I used to be a Christian, and now let me run you through some of his arguments. And I literally was saying to myself, dude, these are some of the dumbest arguments I've ever heard. Like, this stuff convinces you? I'd only been saved a few months. Maybe at that time, a little bit over a year, I think. Let me just come out and just share, because I got stories on story. I'm not in a hurry today. Like I said, I'll be here for 6 hours. I'm going to do a Destiny like live cast. I'm going to do like a streaming video game cast. You know how they play Fortnite for hours? I'm going to be here until I feel I got it all out. And then I'm just going to send people here, and I'll decide whether or not I turn off the comments and all these things, because I'm going to make sure I said it for my conscience, because I love you. That's why I'm going to make sure I said it all. So I'm sitting here with them, and I'm like, I've only been saved a year or so at the most. And I'm thinking, you guys think this is compelling? They were all smoking weed. They brought me over to the house, because I'm always down to chill and meet up with people in that way. So I'm meeting up with them, people I know, so I'm meeting up with them. I even met some people online. One of these online troll atheists, he was like saying all this stuff. And I'm like, you're in Chicago, man, come meet me. And then, of course, he was totally different in person, Anyways, I'm like, this convinced you? Like the problem of evil or something, or this type of thing. I'm like, man, this to me, to be honest with you, is child's play. Like, none of this means anything of what you think it means. Like, because if there's no God, this doesn't mean anything. So you're saying there's no God, but then you're using critiques against Christianity, like why I'm not a Christian. Like you're standing on some high ground, like overlooking the Bible, like you're the judge or something. I'm like, what gives you the right to even judge any of these things if there's no God? I hadn't even read Russell. I had not even studied the arguments that I present now. I just understood at that moment, it's just dumb. Everything about it is dumb. Now, do you know I wasn't a pastor? I wasn't getting paid. I could have just started smoking a blunt with them, smoking weed, and just forgot about Christianity and been one of these internet trolls that said, well, I was once a Christian. I was in Bible college, and somebody showed me Bertrand Russell, and now I'm not. Man, to me, it was like, and that's where I've been ever since. That's why I stopped to even show you this. I've been listening to these guys ever since then. I get their books. I read them. I would say I read them more thoroughly than I read, Cornelius Van Til. Look what he says in his own book. Look what he says, Alex Rosenburg, in his own book. Scientism helps respond to these arguments. Do you understand that he's already contradicting himself by saying there's a thing called scientism? If you don't have a scientist who is a person, you don't have scientism. Scientism is not a word, and I say this all the time, and please think about it. It is not a word on Sesame Street where it dances around and it becomes your God, or this is the world of forms. There is nothing called scientism outside of scientists. Scientists ground scientism. So scientism helps you get away from Epicurus's problem, should we fear death? So scientism helps Epicurus respond to these arguments and perhaps even strengthen his original one. Now, this is at the end of his book, The Atheist Guide to Reality, Enjoying Life Without Illusions. The self, the person, the I inside the body is an illusion. along with all the others. This is who we're talking to. This is the guy sitting at the table you're going to hear from in just a minute. That means that even if there is a loophole in Epicurus' argument that death is something you shouldn't worry about. Let me see, sometimes my camera gets in the way. There we go. That there is a loophole in Epicurus' argument that death is something you shouldn't worry about. Science still backs him up. Once again, science doesn't back up anything. Okay? I just had to switch it because I couldn't see my camera was in the way. I apologize. Okay. Science is going to tell you something, boys and girls. Science talks. Think about this for a minute. In this guy's world, science talks. Just let me get a full shot here. Let me get a full shot, full screen. I like when God logic does it. I have to do it here. In his world, science talks. The self, the person, the eye's not talking, that's an illusion, but science talks. The eye inside the body is an illusion along with all the others, and I'll go to the others in just a moment. That means even if there is a loophole, and Epicurus' argument that death is something you shouldn't worry about, science still backs him up. There isn't really any you or me or him or her to worry about death, post-death harm, boringly endless post-death existence, or anything else, because there's not a you. There's not a you. Oh, God help me. God help me, please. Lord, have mercy on the sinner. Look at all these highlights. Do you think, I'm just saying this again, do you think I went to some book club and some atheist told me to highlight these things? Look at my highlights. Look at my highlights, you spiritual Oompa Loompas who come on my page acting like you're going to tell me something. Does that mean you can't learn? No, I'm just saying, if you're not answering my questions, you're not telling me anything I care about. I'm asking you to answer these questions that I got from reading your daddy. From reading your daddy. I'm asking you to answer these questions that I took the time to write after reading your daddy. Let me show you the other illusions. Is there a God? No. What is the nature of reality? What physics says it is. It's a fake laugh, but it's making me really want to laugh. Your guy. The Bible says God mocks proud mockers. If this offends Christians, please just go watch the review. The other one I did, or the simpler video, or go watch somebody else. I love you, Christians, but I'm not here for this right now. I'm here to mess with them. I'm here to get up in their business. Your guy. This is your guy. Says the way he describes what's the nature of reality is what physics says it is. That's what your guy does to answer the first question that I have. Why is there this something rather than another something? Your guy says physics talks to him. At the end of his book, he says he's not even a person for physics to talk to. And yet he believes physics can talk to his illusionary person. Don't act like this offends you. You guys listen to the most foul-mouthed people on the internet. You listen to Dillahunty, you listen to Aaron Ra, you listen to all these foul-mouthed atheists. Do not act like you are offended. Do not clutch your pearls now, you unbelievers. Your guy who answers my question, there's more stupidity in every single word as the sentence goes on, and ends his book with every reason why he should be rejected, put a dunce hat on his head, and put into the corner of the classroom, not even taken seriously. And yet he's going to sit at this table with your heroes, your prophets, your apostles, and try to figure this out. Once you say there is no God, this is what you are reduced to. And I know there's other kinds of atheists other than nice nihilists like Rosenburg, but you know what? Rosenburg is right. So it's like, I understand there's more teams than whoever wins the Super Bowl, but if you want to play me, win the Super Bowl and then come play me. And now when you come play me, let's say I'm a football team overseas and I go, you know what? We only going to play the Super Bowl winner. So you guys figure it out and then you come play me. I have not seen him defeated yet. I have not seen this defeated. This is the easiest thing for him to spout out of his mouth and the hardest thing for you guys to disprove. And the reason why it is because like solipsism and why Dillahunty hangs up on Salafists, those who believe that that's only their mind that exists and so forth, is because there is zero rational arguments against this in your worldview, because everything you say against this, all he has to say is, you don't exist. That is your worldview. I can at least say to the nut, the fruit, the flake that says God told me to do X, Y, and Z. No, he didn't because of this. You are not Joshua in the time of Canaan. You are not this. God didn't tell you to drown your child. I have easy ways to refute false gods, false understandings of God, psychopathic behavior, and yet your person has zero defense against it and admits it. And to give you the reality of this world, he says the most ridiculous thing you could possibly say. What is the nature of reality? Why is there this something, then another something? Because of what physics says. Physics doesn't talk, Dr. Rosenburg. Physics has nothing to say. And if it did, it has nothing to say to you, because you are in illusion. What is the meaning of life? Ditto. Or what is the purpose of the universe? There is none. If you don't want to defeat this, then don't talk and debate with me. Admit this and then now learn from me if you want to be humble, or defeat this. And if you can't defeat this, it's time to vamonos. It's time to roll out. Hasta luego, Holmes. Why am I here? Just dumb luck. Dumb luck doesn't exist. You see how it's a stupid. He doesn't even know what words to put in there. He's trying to be sassy, but he doesn't even know what words to put in there because there's nothing else to say. Once he went from God being no, there's nothing else to say that makes sense. Physics doesn't talk. And if there is no purpose of the universe, your book has no purpose. And if there's no meaning of life, your book has no meaning. And if there's a such thing as dumb luck, then why does dumb luck work in such an organized way? But dumb luck to him is not teleological, guided by design. By him, it's some kind of a force like physics that can exist and talk. Does prayer work? Of course not. Is there a soul? An immortal? Is it immortal? Are you kidding me? Is there free will? Not a chance. Do you understand what you're left with when you say that? What happens when we die? Everything pretty much goes on as before us, except without us. What is the difference between right and wrong, good and bad? There is no moral difference between them. This is your daddy talking. This is your daddy. This is your sky daddy. Talk about Christians and their sky daddy. This is your sky daddy. Your sky daddy talking to you now, making fun of our apostles and prophets. This is your guy. This is your guy. Middle Eastern sheep herders from the Bronze Age aren't going to teach me nothing. This guy's your teacher. This is now your instructor. This is your person. This is your fly around the manure saying, come on, it's good. Get it while it's good. The getting's good. Why should I be moral? because it makes you feel better than being immoral. But remember, according to him, there is no you. So at the end of the book, he should have deleted every you and I and he and she and they out of his book if he wanted to be honest, but then it would have been unreadable. Is abortion, euthanasia, suicide, paying taxes, foreign age, or anything else you don't like? The you don't exist. Forbidden, permissible, or sometimes obligatory. Anything goes. All right. Now, let's listen to your guy. Your guy sit down with a bunch of other guys that believe just like him or share enough in common with him that can't defeat what he says, but have to find agreement. Let's see them explain to us consciousness.
I'm fighting.
Rosenburg going to start it off. I usually listen to him at double speed. I'll put him at 1.5.
Problems with consciousness. I would thought that today, this afternoon, we'd be talking about the Mysterians' problems with consciousness, right? Why? You think it's like not even on the table anymore?
Find a problem.
Well, the problem of qualia, the problem of subjective experience, the what it's like to be a fat problem, the things, of course, that Dan has spent a lot of time fighting against for a long time, and which we all appreciate that he's done the good. No, but it obviously it's like whack-a-mole. You know, we've got Nagel again giving us this crap, and it's being taken seriously all over the place, right? Now,
I need to explain now.
Yeah, you probably want to say, give the story quickly.
well, it's the idea that there are that there is a what it's like to be conscious that is incapable of being captured by third-person neuroscience, that there is an aboutness of human thought that is incapable of being realized by...
Oh my gosh. It's like I don't do good at reactions either. People say I talk too much. How long is he into this? He's like, have I listened to it for like 30 seconds? He's literally going to argue against what we call a soul and what it means to be a you while being a you. I mean, I'm just going to let this play out. I mean, if you didn't get it from his book and you don't get it from this, there's just no more helping, because the Bible says there's a point where I can't even answer anymore. This guy's upset that now they're dealing with the Mysterion model of consciousness because it won't go away, because their answers are so absurd. Even other atheists are trying to do something about it, or deists or agnostics in the scientific field of neuroscience, and then trying to understand the self. The philosophers, they don't want to bite his bullet, and so they're trying so hard. And he is like, they're trying so hard to explain how they're still a self, and they're making Alex Rosenburg mad because he just wants to rip it away from them. You're not selves. Thomas Nagel, you're not a self. Get out of that mystery. Just admit it, you're not a self. Then who's talking to me?
Input-output neurological systems, and which provides to the Mysterians the strongest basis for their rejection of materialism and naturalism. And,
Or simply to say that science could never touch it.
yes.
So, but I thought, okay, that's an interesting point, because I actually thought that we were going to go at some point there. And my take on Nagel's paper, which I reread recently because of one of my classes.
I mean, what it's like?
What it's like.
Yeah, but he's just written a new book.
No, yeah, I know.
He's up the stakes.
I think we should. Yeah, I think we should bracket the new book out, because it sounds. I haven't read it. I've read only 2 or 3 reviews of it, and it sounds really wacky. But so I want to hear what people think about the what is it like to be a bad thing. I took that, the message of that. I'm not saying that this is what Nagel intended, but I took that to say not that the strong implication that is that there's something somehow that science cannot touch or cannot explain, or whatever it is about conscious experiences, quality, and all that, but simply that if we want to apply the third-person scientific analysis to first-person experiences, we're making a category mistake. No matter what how good your description and accurate your description is of the way the human brain works, you're not going to have that experience unless you are that brain. So we're never going to have the experience of being a bat. That doesn't mean we cannot understand how bats work. Is that not sensible?
Well, that's not what Nagel.
No. That's what I'm saying. But is that not more sensible than what people are taking out of Nagel?
Oh my gosh. This is where my patience has to come in. A self is self-referential. A self alone knows itself because it is the self. You cannot reduce the self down to something other than the self and it still be the self. In other words, it comes down to The self is either the first point of knowledge in a person, or the self does not exist. Nagel is trying to argue that there possibly can be a self and it not be found in materialism. They want to take Nagel and put him back into materialism and say that the self doesn't exist and that the self can be reduced down to that which material items do. They are doing this, I cannot express this enough, while being a self. They all are listening to each other respectfully. They are not treating each other like pops, cans of pop that are shaken up and fizzing. They have agreement and disagreement. They are trying to change each other's mind. They are showing like and dislike towards Nagel, even towards each other. They are bearing forth every single attribute of a self, and yet they don't want it to exist. And let me just go there with you. Chat. Let's go back here. Let's come out. Like I said, I'm not in a hurry. Help us, Lord. Help us, Lord, to love the fool. Help me, Lord, to love the fool. Help me to love the fool when they act so foolish. Explain Nagel's view of the self like I'm for. Just so everybody here can get it. Nagel's view of the self is kind of like this. Imagine you're playing with the toy. You see the toy, you can touch it, and you know it's there. Now think about how you know you're you. That's like how Nagel thinks of the self. He says that when you think about yourself, it's just not seeing a toy from the outside. It's like knowing something from the inside. He believes that there's something special about how we understand ourselves, like a hidden world inside our minds that only we can see. So it's irreducible. It can't go any further. We can think about our feelings and experiences in a way that's different from how we think about things like toys or the world around us. That's what makes you you in a way that no one else can understand. Why does Rosenburg not like this view as an atheist? 4-year-old again, just so we can all get it. Doesn't like this view because he thinks that everything about us, including our thoughts and feelings, can be explained by science, which, remember, science doesn't say anything. He believes that the brain works like a machine and there's nothing special, no hidden world inside us that makes us different. Okay, back to the boys. Back to the unbelievers, heroes. The heroes of the unbelievers. Are you see? This is where I'll get people lost. I mean, I had a dear brother here bringing up what do we call Lee Strobel? I don't even know if there's any nerds left here, but trust me, we're on a much different level than Lee Strobel. Not trying to make him feel bad at all. So I might have lost my Christians. The atheists already got offended. I might just be talking to myself, a madman screaming into the wind. But does everybody understand that it's impossible to know what it's like to be a bat without being a bat? I mean, do we not understand that the reason why Nagel doesn't argue that is because it's impossible? You don't even think you know what it's like to be you. And yet you now want to tell me you. I can't even say the words without entering into the stupidity of the atheist. You now want to tell me you, the one you did not deny in materialism, can also know what it's like to be an other, a bat? That's why Nagel doesn't argue against. It's like arguing against, can nothing exist? Like your man who came out with the book, The Universe from Nothing. And everybody had to laugh him to shame, so that he had to really admit that nothing really was a something that had a vacuum and all of these laws that were involved in it. Talking about the universe from nothing. The scorn that he faced. Let me go back here. Let me just stay on. What am I on the chat? Yeah, I'm on the chat right here. That's what you guys are seeing. Book, Universe from Nothing, Scorned, even by atheists, because no thing can exist. The book of Universe from Nothing by Lawrence Krauss is criticized even by some atheists because how it deals with the idea of nothing. Krauss argues that the universe could have come from nothing, but when people read his explanation, they realize that the nothing he talks about isn't really nothing at all. It still involves quantum fields, physical laws, or something like that. Many atheists and critics, including philosophers, scorn the book because they believe Krauss is playing with the definition of nothing. In everyday language, nothing means literally no thing, no space, no time, no laws, no particles. But Krauss's version of nothing is more complicated, is more like a complicated vacuum. Isn't that what I mentioned? Which still has some kind of structure. This leads to the criticism that he's not really answering the big question of how everything truly came from nothing. Dennett is upset. Daniel Dennett is upset that Nagel is saying we can't know what it feels like to be a bat in materialism because we can't even know what it feels like to be ourselves. Know you. What do you guys not get about this? Help me, Jesus. Help me, Lord. Burning calories today, tell you that. Well, if this is the way he talks to unbelievers, no wonder nobody wants to listen to him. Now, sometimes you got to show some passion. Sometimes you got to do some Jesus in the temple stuff in different locations. This is Jesus in the temple of the unbelievers' gods and their false idolatry. A little bit back on Dennett here.
He assumes that we can never know what it's like to be a bat, and then he argues about what the implications of his premise are.
Right.
And that's a huge bit of misdirection right there. But then there is a fundamental ambiguity in his paper, which I think I finally got to the bottom of. There's two senses in which you could be making the assumption that we cannot imagine what it's like to be a bat. One is we just lack the pigments on our palate to imagine it because bats are so different from us. And the other is, whether or not we could imagine it, we could never confirm that we've done it successfully. To compare, we could never imagine what the winning lottery number in tomorrow is. Well, yeah, you could by accident. You just wouldn't know if you were right till the next.
Yeah, obviously you would never know if you did it because there is no such thing as the knowledge of a bat. They're already assuming there's the knowledge of what it means to be a bat. If you are joining and you're trying to figure out what I'm talking about, we are so deep in the weeds right now. One of the atheists, and I believe, I don't know if we call Nagel an atheist. Let's see, is Nagel an atheist? Let me go back to where I had him here. Is Thomas Nagel an atheist? I don't think he was. Okay, he does consider, but he's a unique kind of atheist. Okay. So, that's where you kind of get into definitions. Basically, what we're trying to show is that there's no soul. That's what they believe, right? Nagel is arguing that there can be something like a soul that's not reducible down to physical processes, okay? And then because of that, these naturalists are upset because they deny that there's even a you inside of you. You're only just chemicals. And what they're trying to say is that one of Nagel's kind of assumptions is that we can't understand what it's like to be a bat. Therefore, we couldn't understand what it's like to be us because these things are not just merely physical ideas or scientific knowledge. They're actually experiential that are found in the seat of what we would call a soul. And by the way, the Bible says that these kind of animals even have a nephesh, a soul. So there is a soul within certain kinds of living creatures as well as humans. Okay, we share this in common with them, though our soul is made in the image of God. And now Nagel is trying to say that, if we could do this, we wouldn't even really know if we did it right. Of course, because you don't know if you do anything else right. Physics and science doesn't talk to you. You talk to yourself as a soul as you discover the knowledge of God. You would have no knowledge of anything, let alone a bat, if you did it right.
Instead. So there's a question about whether it's confirming imagination or whether it's just not being able to render in imagination what it's like to be a bat. I think
you understand it's all an imagination. And in this world, everything's an imagination. Everything's an illusion.
A lot of people think because he's talking about bats that he means the first. Because we don't have echolocation, because, so forth, we don't have the pigments in our palate. We just can't do it. But in fact, that's not what he means, or at least he abandons that. Because I once put it to him point blank on Justice Point. I said, suppose you had a twin brother who was also a philosopher. Could you imagine what it's like to be him? If it's pigments, he should say, yeah, of course. He said no. Then what the heck is
exactly? Because he's not a mere materialist. And you would never know what it's like to be the knower. The knower only knows themselves and the God who has thus made them. Know God and know thyself. Otherwise, there is no self, and that's what they want. They are arguing with themselves, literally with themselves and among themselves, that they are no selves. This is what we have been reduced down to.
Is he talking about bats for?
But he actually says that the problem. I'm just using bats as an example, but it's also true for us.
But then notice that there's some something like sleight of hand going on. Why does he bother stressing how alien bats are from
He
us
thinks it's awesome.
if he could just as well be talking about an identical twin brother of him? And of course, there's another conflict in that paper, and that is he goes on and on about bats. Why? Because presumably it's telling us something about what it's like to be a bat. And why wouldn't more of the same tell us more and more about what it's like to be a bat?
And Richard, of course, if you were here, would chime in that how furious he is at Nagel because what Nagel took and put in that paper was developed by a well-known British bat scientist during World War II.
And, well,
Yes, and the reason why they have the knowledge of the bats and it can continue to differentiate the knowledge they have of a bat in themselves is because they're a self, the bat is a self, a soulish being, and they can distinguish between the laws of logic by using the law of identity, excluded middle, things that their worldview does not account for. Well, like in other words, like Nagel's like one step further down the road than they are, okay?
the caveat is, and I went to the paper on what it's like to be a bat. You know, it's,
Yes,
you can do it. I mean, the very premise of his paper is just wrong.
Guys, for those of you who are not following us on Twitter, somebody just tweeted the following. In honor of move naturalism, here are some bat embryos. And what is it like to be a bat by Tamil Nobel? And there's a picture of 3 bat embryos that these guys posted into our discussion. So.
Yeah, that's literally the best that the world has to offer, okay? Think about it. We can know what a bat is like scientifically because we can research a bat. Ha, ha, ha. This guy's saying that you don't know what it's like to be a bat is really wrong. No. My friends, he's telling you that if a bat has a self and you have a self, in the same way that you can only know yourself, the bat can only know itself. You can't now know the bat in the same way you know yourself. Oh, but our way around that is to say we don't have any selves and we only know things scientifically. But who is knowing things scientifically? If not the self. And if it's not the bat self flying around, then what is the bat? Oh, it's just chemicals in motion. Oh, then we're just chemicals. And we just go on and on and on down the world of his absurdity. Let me show you some more absurdity now. Okay, let me show you a little bit more. Let's do this. Let me remove this here. Coming up on 2 hours, not too bad. I might be done here. Then I'm going to invite anybody on, but I don't even see anybody on. Just as they would say, a madman shouting into the wind. Okay, here we go. Let's go to William Lane Craig and Cosmic Skeptic. Trying to get around things like what we would call are the first cause. Okay, let's see where he has to go here.
Began to exist. What if I said something like, because we both agreed a moment ago that the matter that makes up human beings.
I agree with you. It isn't clear at all what is to be classed as Homo sapiens. There are all kind of hominids that it's very difficult to classify.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, if you go back in time far enough, for example, 1 million BC, there weren't any human beings around at that point. Mm-hmm. Human beings began to exist sometime later, and that's an objective fact that has nothing to do with our conceptions.
Well,
yeah. Now notice what he has to do to get around things coming into existence. The first thing that he has to get around is that nothing really comes into existence except the original particles of the universe. And so he takes on the position known as meteorological nihilism. And that's a philosophical position in metaphysics. Let me just put this up here. So now he's trying to say like, oh, we use this kind of inductive method to see that a chair had a beginning and it wasn't always a chair, to then say the universe must have had a beginning, kind of like the watchmaker. But his way around that, his first cope is to literally say nothing really comes into existence except the first thing. And so now he's going to give himself permission to be able to only have to explain one thing instead of multiple things. So he's going to basically make the argument that really it's not chairs are coming into existence. It's not like watches are coming into existence. It's not like any of those things are really coming into existence. It's simply that where are we at here? Sorry, I'm just getting distracted. Is that there's only one thing, and that is the universe and its particles. Okay, so he's going to try to reduce everything down to just that. There we go. I should have just looked it up. Okay, here we go. So he's going to go into what is known as meteorological nihilism. Okay, and here it is. Meteorological nihilism is a philosophical position in metaphysics that denies the existence of composite objects. According to this view, only fundamental, indivisible parts, often referred to as simples, truly exist. And any object we perceive as composed of parts, like a chair, a car, or even a human, is not actually a distinct unified entity, but merely an arrangement of those fundamental parts. In other words, mereological nihilists argue that there are no wholes, only parts. And then this is now where they would have the problem of the one and the many, and yet somehow there is one whole. There is one whole with parts, because all of the parts cannot have a structure of what we would know as the universe to hold form unless there was at least one form. Now, Craig does not hold him to the argument of the one and the many, but it would be very relevant here, because you cannot have only parts. If you had only parts, then how would those parts be a part of a distinguishable thing? That thing has to be labeled as a thing, and it's now a whole, and then everything in that thing can be called a thing, and then those things can be called parts. You cannot have just a thing of parts. You cannot have an item of only parts without being a unified whole of those very parts. Okay? And I'll just say right here, how does this fall into the trap of the one and the many? Explores how to reconcile the existence of the one with the existence of diversity of opinions. Mereological nihilism can be seen as falling into this position as this way, emphasizing the many over the one, emphasizes the many fundamental parts over the one composite or the whole. It claims only individuals truly exist while composite objects don't exist. Explaining the unity of concepts runs into the issue of explaining how can the concepts of groups, how we can apply concepts to groups of simple objects, neglecting the one. It could also be because it's denying the reality of composite objects altogether, including denying itself as a whole, because parts cannot alone be unified unless a whole. Correct? Yes, exactly. You've identified a key self-referential problem with that of mereological nihilism. It denies the existence of wholes, but relies on the concept of a whole to even make sense of the parts. There you go. I just do not have time to go into this and how ridiculous this is. And yet, your guy, I want to say this again to everyone listening to me. Your guy, your smartest guy, the one you think is amazing, cosmic skeptic, is so smart. That is what now he has to believe in. And that's not even the worst of it. The worst is coming ahead, that even though he only has to believe in one something, not all of these other somethings coming from nothing, just one something, the particles in the universe, which makes no sense, is self-contradictory by the whole, which it says it has no holes because it's only parts, and it falls to the problem of the one and the many. He then, after he asserts that nonsense, will then say that this whole, which he denies, can come in as parts of particles that has no objects, only parts, no holes, only parts. And it does so because a quality, a self-referentiate, a quality to its own self, an identifying principle to its own self, is that it puts itself into existence.
Allow me to try putting the same statement you just made in different words. You said human beings began to exist. What if I said something like, because we both agreed a moment ago that the matter that makes up human beings already existed, even if the human beings didn't. What if I said something like, the matter which exists arranged itself in such a way that we would label Homo sapiens, right? That seems to me the same thing as saying that the Homo sapiens began to exist.
Well, if we would label it correctly, but there is an objective fact here. It doesn't begin to exist in virtue of our labeling it. The reason we label it as a Homo sapiens or as a human being is because you have an organism that is recognizably human. It's not reptilian. It's not.
Do you understand what he's saying? He's basically saying when humans came into existence, they're holding on to evolution, or just anything coming into existence. It doesn't really come into existence as a unique whole. It is simply an aggregate of parts, and we're putting a label on it. And William Lane Craig is trying to say, just calling it a new restructuring of the parts doesn't help you, because it's actually a unique thing. Otherwise, and he's going to say here in just a little bit, you have to believe that humans have existed, that people have existed, that chairs have, everything has existed at the same time, because their particle has existed. And if you want a way around that, the only way around that is to identify that we're not just in a world of parts, we're also in wholes, which by the way, itself is of a whole.
Amphibian, this is a hominin that is endowed with certain kinds of mental and behavioral capacities that we would count as human. And the beginning of existence of that thing is explored by paleontologists and paleoanthropologists just wholly independently of us.
I think I've hit on our disagreement then, which seems to be that you would say that we call a Homo sapien a new object that begins to exist, a new thing, because it begins to exist. Whereas I would say that conceptually it begins to exist because we decided to call it Homo sapiens. It's kind of the reverse, right? I think that's the disagreement we're having.
Yeah, well, this gets into this question again that I mentioned, whether or not you think there are really composite objects or not. And however you come down on that, there are going to be certain entities that are not composite objects, like fundamental particles, like electrons and quarks and so forth. And I would say persons, like yourself. And these provide clear-cut examples of things that exist that are not just arrangements of prior matter, and therefore don't have any objective reality.
Well, okay, so the reason why I wanted to make this argument is to try and get across the point that I feel that the only thing that, if anything, has meaningfully begun to exist, the only thing that would fulfill that criterion would be the universe itself, because everything within the universe that begins to exist in a conceptual sense only, is the argument that I was trying to make. But clearly you disagree with that.
That's right.
I suppose.
You're talking here about a view that is, and I hate to get technical, it's called mereological nihilism.
Yeah,
yes. That there are no composite objects.
Essentially, yes.
But even mereological nihilists recognize that there are fundamental particles that are not composites. They're not aggregates of things. And some, like Peter Van Inwagen, would say that living things, like horses and humans and persons, are also not just aggregates of material, because they are alive and therefore have a kind of unity.
Once again, do you realize the cope they have to go to? They have to deny objects, but only parts, while denying that the whole thing of the part exists as itself a whole. And they deny that this is the way that the universe actually works. And so therefore there isn't actually anything made. They have to deny this, that there's actually anything new. They have to accept all of this. And then they laugh at you. They laugh at Christians. They think they're so smart. And this is what it's been reduced down to, brothers and sisters. This is his way out of the cosmological argument. Anything that has begun to exist has a cause. The universe has begun to exist, therefore it has a cause. And then it would be like, you can go back over it. If anything has begun to exist like the universe, God can be the only explanation of that cause. The universe has begun to exist. Therefore, God is the only rational explanation of the cause of the universe. You know, something like this. He is trying to get out of this by saying that the universe really doesn't have things coming in and out of existence that we can use as something inductively to see this as a matter of common sense, that there's nothing really existing except particles themselves, and that there's no real wholes, there's only parts. And then he's going to have to then say that the only reason why that the universe can be the way that it is because it creates itself. It's its own mommy and daddy.
To their being that goes beyond being merely an aggregate of material things. So I think the person who's going to take the line of mereological nihilism, well, it's worse than mereological nihilism. I mean, he has to say that there are no fundamental objects.
Well, I'm not sure that's the case. For instance, if we accept that fundamental particles exist, what we mean by fundamental particles are simply things that can't be broken down any further. And so what we mean when we say beginning to exist is a rearrangement of fundamental particles in such a way that it, kind of, that it gives rise to arbitrary labeling as a new object, right? So that's the kind of view that I would take. Not that there aren't composite things, but that everything that begins to exist is just an arrangement of composite things.
All right, that's not an arrangement of fundamental things.
Yes, but if you break it down far enough, yes.
Right. Yes, okay, then that would be a consistent view. It's a very radical view, one that I wouldn't hold. I can't see any good reason to be a mereological nihilist. But in any case, I don't think that would subvert the argument for the universe beginning to exist.
Right.
Because in that case, you can rephrase the argument, not such that.
He just tries to soften it. Even though he's arguing about it, he tries to soften it because now he wants to say, well, the arrangement is what I'm talking about. I do understand there's a different arrangement. And that's really, if you watch the discussion that Craig had to back him into, because if he doesn't agree that the arrangement makes a different thing, then all things have existed all at once for the same amount of time. And so now he's like, yeah, I can kind of see that. And I do have respect for him, by the way, of learning, because it seems like he's learning with Dr. Craig here now. And now we'll get to the greater fallacy of his belief.
The universe began to exist, but you could say all fundamental particles began to exist.
Sure, but then you see how that just completely undermines the idea of the common sense experience of things beginning to exist. Because although it may make philosophical sense to talk about fundamental particles beginning to exist, we wouldn't be able to say something like we've observed it happening.
Oh, no, I think that's not right, Alex. What it requires is a modification of the second premise, not the first. The first premise, that whatever begins to exist has a cause, would remain intact. It's just that on the mereological nihilist view, very, very few things begin to exist because they don't exist. There are no people, there are no horses, there are no skyscrapers, there are no chairs. But if you reformulate the second premise so that it states not the universe began to exist, but all the fundamental particles began to exist, you get the same conclusion.
Okay, so perhaps I can explain why, because you say it's at least a consistent worldview. Let me try and explain why I thought this would beg the question when it came to the Kalam, was because if we accept the view that everything that begins to exist as we observe it in the world, let's say, is not actually beginning to exist in a meaningful sense, it's just a rearrangement of pre-existing matter. And ultimately, the furthest you can break it down to fundamental particles, but those existed since the beginning of the universe, meaning that, in other words, in a meaningful sense, the only thing that began to exist was the universe, right? Now, the reason this is a problem is because to beg the question is to accept the first premise only by virtue of already having granted the conclusion. Now, if the first premise is everything that begins to exist has a cause, but the only thing that truly begins to exist in the sense we want to talk about is the universe, then the first premise just becomes the universe has a cause, which is identical to the conclusion.
No, it just means that the universe would be the only instance of that first premise. That I want your listeners to understand how radical the view is that you're expressing here. It's not just that things don't begin to exist.
Oh my gosh, because he goes back to, he says he's denying it, but then he goes right back to it. And that's why Craig has to go, you can't have your cake and eat it too here, dude.
It's rather that these things don't exist at all. There are no such things as chairs and planets and people and skyscrapers. None of these things actually exist. And that's why they don't begin to exist. The only thing that begins to exist would be these fundamental particles.
Once again, I don't even know if anybody cares, but I just have to explain it. He's trying to say, yes, I'll admit that in some sense they exist by being rearranged differently. But when Craig holds him to that, this idea that whatever begins to exist has a cause, he's going to say, oh, well, no. The only thing that really began to exist was the particles, and they're just being rearranged. Now, by denying that, what he's now saying is that people actually don't exist. Arrangements of those things actually don't exist. Those holes do not exist. That's why he's holding him back to it. If you're going to say that we can't base the Kalam on observing things coming into existence, and you're going to try to say we're just labeling, if you're going to say that, then that means there are no such things as these actual concrete objects.
And so this is you can take that line if you want, but it's really a radical view because I know that I exist. I think Descartes is quite right about that. If there's one thing I can't doubt, it's that I exist. And I began to exist.
Look, we're right back here. That's why, see, this is where, honestly, people think I'm silly by going to Rosenburg and so forth. That's literally where Connor finds himself. O'Connor finds himself in the same place because he, the self, which only just is mentioned in passing by Craig here, but if he himself if his point is right, then he himself doesn't actually exist. He's just a composition. I don't know what word I'm trying to say there. A composition of particles. So his self is not really coming into existence. So he doesn't have a self either. I mean, it's the same nonsense.
Exist. So I think this is not, this is sort of like an academic way to try to escape the argument, but it's not a plausible solution. The person really is looking for truth.
The two observations I'd make is potentially first to say that on the Cartesian view, yes, you can know you exist, but I'm not sure you could therefore know that you began to exist, but just on the Cartesian view.
Fair enough.
But and secondly, and kind of important here is that you say that by denying that things begin to exist, I deny that things exist. I would rather frame it as saying something like the limits of an object, and for people who are listening, what I mean by that are the boundaries of the thing that make it that thing as opposed to something else, right? The definitional boundary that
you would not know if you began to exist. Look at that. So I'm panpsychic now. So everything exists at the same time in the same kind of psychological way. I mean, that's his argument to when Craig says, well, I know that I exist. Okay, well, you would know you exist, but you wouldn't know you had a beginning to your existence. Dude, now we have to go back to the other part. This guy is like whack-a-mole right here. Craig wasn't using the argument of him knowing himself as a self to nail down the beginning of something. He was nailing it. He was using that to show that a person is actually not the exact same thing as another person, and that person is not the same thing as a chair. And so that's what he was using it for. When you want to know why he believes he began to exist, he then goes into his scientific argument of when his body began to exist and he began to have a experience as a self. It's like he doesn't even get, Connor doesn't even get what his point was about that. His point was used to differentiate things, not whether or not things had a beginning, because he's going to get stuck on the beginning right now of Craig's point and miss that Craig was trying to show that there are actually things that destroys mereological nihilism.
You put around that thing is not a property of the thing, but a property of us in a way, right? So it does exist conceptually. So I can make sense of saying, here is a book. But what I'm saying is that my calling this a book and my saying that this has boundaries such that this is a book and this other thing over here is not that book is a product of my mind, right? But it's like it does conceptually exist. However, the actual boundary itself is an arbitrary.
It's a mind-dependent reality. That's why I said this is a sort of anti-realism that is extremely implausible. You're saying that you construct reality by imagining these boundaries, but these are not mind-independent realities. If there were no people, there would be no books and planets and galaxies and stars.
Yeah, it's a strange metaphor.
See, exactly. Do you hear him? Listen to your hero. Please listen to your hero, Alex O'Connor, say, this is a strange thought. Not only is it as strange as he's going to, he admits here, but he will admit later that his other thoughts are absurd. It's not only strange, it's absurd. And I know he's going to say it sounds strange, it sounds absurd, but it's not really strange or absurd in that way, I guess. But my friend, if it quacks like a duck, it is a duck. Come on. This is absurdity. You're saying that the only reason why there's a book today is because we label it a book. The only reason why there's these things here today is because we label him those things. This is all trying to get out of the common sense observation that things start and have beginnings. And so the universe, even as science has shown, has started and has a beginning. This is his way around this.
I would say that calling something like anti-realism might be misleading because of the fact that I wouldn't say that nothing exists independent of the mind, right? But it's like it does conceptually exist. However, the actual boundary itself is an arbitrary.
It's a mind-dependent reality. That's why I said this is a sort of anti-realism that is extremely implausible. You're saying that you construct reality by imagining these boundaries, but these are not mind-independent realities. If there were no people, there would be no books and planets and galaxies and stars.
Yeah, it's a strange line of thought. I would say that calling something like anti-realism might be misleading because of the fact that I wouldn't say that nothing exists independent of the mind, right? I'm not saying that things existing or rather, existence is a product of the mind. What I'm saying is that categorizing that which exists into independent objects is a product of the mind, right?
Right, except for fundamental
particles, which themselves began at the beginning of the universe.
Now, this would be the only mind-independent.
And it just seems like he's going back in a circle. Now he's going back to, okay, well, I'll admit that they exist. Like the chair actually does exist, and it's not my label that causes it to exist. Okay, so I'll go there with you. But that was Craig's whole point of trying to show they do exist separately as objects. Okay, now if you're doing that, now if you believe in that, you're rejecting mereological nihilism. And now you're back to where we first started. Things do not have eternal regressions in the past. They have infinite beginning points, or rather finite beginning points.
Independent realities on this mereological nihilist view that we just conceptually set boundaries to things and so construct the world of objects around us, planets and galaxies and stars.
Yeah, it's a strange line of thought. I would say that calling something like anti-realism might be misleading because of the fact that I wouldn't say that nothing exists independent of the mind, right? I'm not saying that things existing or rather, existence is a product of the mind. What I'm saying is that categorizing that which exists into independent objects is a product of the mind, right?
Right, except for fundamental
particles, which themselves began at the beginning of the universe. Now,
those would be the only mind-independent realities on this mereological nihilist view that we just conceptually set boundaries to things and so construct the world of objects around us.
Yeah, I think one thing I've learned is how radical the view is that I hold. Because I think you're probably writing the implications, and I hadn't considered them to the fullest extent before, that if I'm going
Oh, wow. So you mean that Dr. Craig is not such the Oompa Loompa you guys thought he was? Oh, we love Alex O'Connor. He just destroys all these philosophers, and Craig is so low tier. You actually mean that William Lane Craig is now giving him the bullet to bite according to his own worldview that he had not thought of so thoroughly before. Let me take that out of double time and hear that clearly so that y'all hating on William Lane Craig, thinking he's such a boomer, can't hang with your boys. Notice how much respect he has for him, by the way. It's one thing to talk about Mike Tyson. It's another thing to get into a ring with him. It's one thing to talk about Dr. William Lane Craig. It's another thing to get into the ring with him. And this young man, I respect him. I actually like his demeanor. I believe we'll see him a Christian in our lifetime. I'm going on record for that. I'm not saying God told me. I'm just saying my guess, my intuition is that he becomes a Christian in our lifetime. That's my guess. He may not. And I'm not saying God told me. I'm just saying I want to go on record on calling this, who's going to win the Super Bowl, whatever. I'm just calling this. I just think he has so much respect. He gets a lot of what's being said where others, it goes right over their head. And I just appreciate him, right? Now, notice how he talks about Craig. Not the way y'all talk about Craig. Notice the way he talks about him.
Right, except for fundamental
particles, which themselves began at the beginning of the universe. Now,
those would be the only mind-independent realities on this mereological nihilist view that we just conceptually set boundaries to things and so construct the world of objects around us.
Yeah, I think one thing I've learned is how radical the view is that I hold, because I think you're probably right in the implications, and I hadn't considered them to the fullest extent before, that if I'm going to say something like things only begin to exist as a rearrangement of pre-existing matter, and the beginning to exist is an arbitrary metric we put on it, that the only thing that exists definitionally as an independent object, mind independently, are fundamental particles, and everything else that exists as kind of individually discernible objects are mind dependent, which is a really interesting radical implication of my view that I'll give some thought, and for my listeners, I'll try and write an explication on that view.
Okay, now right there, I don't have his follow-up. I think I remember listening to it, but I don't remember it offhand. I think there's a follow-up that came after this. Boom, respect. Now, notice this. This is not the guy at that point. It's like in a wrestling match. He's tapping. At this point, you get him up. You do not kick a man while he is down. He has now learned from our best, one of our best, and he has now humbled himself to admit that he has not thought this through and that now he's going to think it through more. Tip my hat. The reason why I played this is because someone was trying to answer his question, my question, with Alex O'Connor, and they did not answer this problem here. Okay. Now, they said some of his stuff, but they didn't answer this. So if you have his answer to this, why is there a something the way our something is instead of another kind of something? Now you can answer it. And if you want to quote him, that's fine. But you better give it the answer that has the weight behind it to get out of the self-contradictory nature of mereological nihilism that I pointed out, the problem with the many and the one. And then what Craig is pointing out is that you then have to admit that no actual objects exist as a whole, only in the mind as conceptions. So unless you can answer those 2 points, and I'll see how long I leave comments playing, but I'll remind you of it by tagging it in right here, the one and the many, and then that objects don't exist except as concepts in the mind. Unless you can get around that, you are in a self-contradictory position, starting, as Craig even mentioned, with yourself, because in yourself does not exist. The other person does not exist unless my mind gives them the label that they are a different person. So unless I would have labeled them, they wouldn't have existed. And then you go all the way back down into solipsism, and solipsism would believe that only one mind exists and we're all products of it. Somewhat like similar, we're living in the dream of a god or so forth. Okay. Those who are joining with us, you have gone down deep into the weeds. Come back and listen. If you are an unbeliever, hang on. I said I was going to get it all out. And then in a few moments, I'll bring you up, but I'm going to hold you to those questions. I'm playing 21. I am playing horse, and I'm certainly not playing polo. All right. Respect for him for saying that. And then now let's get to what I believe is even a more redonkulous. If you didn't think it could get more redonkulous than that, it actually does. It actually gets more redonkulous than him denying objects except by our labels of conception, our conceptual labels.
So if you do take that view, this sort of mereological nihilism, then you're right. We wouldn't have any inductive examples of things that begin to exist.
Right.
Oops. Oopsie doopsie. Let me put this back up. Biddy boop. Okay. I don't know if you guys heard that. Let's go.
And an object, mind independently, are fundamental particles, and everything else that exists as kind of individually discernible objects are mind dependent, which is a really interesting radical implication of my view that I'll give some thought, and for my listeners, I'll try and write an explication on that view.
So if you do take that view, this sort of mereological nihilism, then you're right. We wouldn't have any inductive examples of things that begin to exist.
Right.
The first premise would still be true, that whatever begins to exist has a cause, but we wouldn't have any examples of things that begin to exist other than these fundamental particles. We still got all of those to deal with, and that's fine, but you wouldn't be able to, as you say, appeal to your common experience on this view.
Yeah, so this is why
that's a fair point.
And this is why I thought it begs.
Do you own your own home in Illinois, but still rent your electricity? For a limited time only, homeowners in specific zip code.
Question was
now notice this, because it's about ready to get more ridiculous. Craig reduces it down to his mereological nihilism. Okay, you don't want to believe anything exists. Yourself doesn't exist. I mean, he's basically just conceding the point for the sake of argument, because Craig can still say, and we can still say, where did all the particles come from, dude? Okay, so you want to deny selves or wholes, and that they're only parts, and somehow we're all the same thing, but we're not the same thing, and that if there wasn't someone to label, they would remain the same thing, but our labels now make them different. It's almost like in the abortion debate, that it's not a life unless you ascribe human value to it. Oh, man, I mean, this is just crazy, right? Okay, so Craig's like, okay, I will accept, think about this, for the sake of argument, Craig is willing to accept his mereological nihilism, but then put him right back in the same place, which is, why do these particles come into existence? Where did these parts come from? Okay.
was because, and I guess the implication is more radical now that I think about it, but the reasoning I was thinking of was, well, if the only thing that ever really began to exist was the universe, then as you say that the first premise, although it doesn't become the conclusion, it means that the only thing which begins to exist is the universe. So when we say everything that begins to exist has a cause, the only example we can think of is the universe. And so by saying the first premise, you're essentially believing that because you believe the universe has a cause.
Oh, no, now there I think that's a mistake, Alex.
Okay.
I have actually reformulated the Kalam cosmological argument to make it more modest by rephrasing the first premise in the following way. If the universe began to exist, then the universe has a cause. Second premise, the universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. So that statement of the argument would be fully in line with mereological nihilism. If the universe began to exist, then the universe has a cause. Or if the fundamental particles began to exist, then they have a cause, et cetera, et cetera. So it would just mean that it's not begging the question. It would just mean that you couldn't use the sort of inductive argument that I appeal to.
Quite right. As you point out in your series about objections and about the objection of circularity in particular, you say, well, arguments don't beg the question, people beg the question, right? And so I would agree with you that if you reformulate the Kalam, or even if you keep it in the original form but use a different justification, you're not begging the question. My essay was just trying to make the point that if you justify it in that inductive manner, it seems to me that you're begging the question.
Well, I'll agree with you that the inductive argument wouldn't work if you have this kind of mereological nihilism.
And this is the only point that Alex is now trying to make. Like, if you're granting to me mereological nihilism, then you can't say that inductively. And just inductively just means by our experience with science and testing and observing. You couldn't say that everything we see had a cause, like a chair had a cause as a chair maker and so forth. And I don't even know why Craig is willing to entertain the argument, but he does. So he then tries to show him, yes, I couldn't back up the premise of things having the universe needing a cause because I see other things that have a cause. You couldn't use that inductively. That's basically what he's saying. But I wouldn't give that up. But Craig is doing that, I guess, to be nice or to just try to make it as modest as possible.
And then I would fall back on the two metaphysical arguments, which for me are the most important, as opposed to the inductive argument.
So the kind of other justification that you might give, and the one that I found really interesting, was saying, if things can come into existence out of nothing, that is, if you deny the first premise, then why doesn't it happen all the time, right? Why don't things begin to exist out of nothing all the time? Now, my first thought was to say, how do we know that they don't, right? Because to come to being out of nothing.
See, even Craig laughs. Like, how do we not know? Because if you're going to say that universes can come out of nothing, then why don't pigs and horses, why don't we keep seeing it? And now, this is why I told you it's going to get so absurd. And now Alex is going to say, well, maybe it does. You guys, listen, this is your guy. This is your guy, and he is proposing to you that possibly all types of things come out of nothing to save the belief that the universe can come out of nothing. To save the belief that the universe can come out of nothing, he is willing to give us all a chuckle and to believe that, you're right, everything can come out of nothing. You want to talk about make-believe. You think we play make-believe.
Would surely imply coming into existence
wouldn't work if you have this kind of mereological nihilism. And then I would fall back on the two metaphysical arguments, which for me are the most important, as opposed to the inductive argument.
So the kind of other justification that you might give, and the one that I found really interesting, was saying, if things can come into existence out of nothing, that is, if you deny the first premise, then why doesn't it happen all the time, right? Why don't things begin to exist out of nothing all the time? Now, my first thought was to say, how do we know that they don't, right? Because to come into being out of nothing would surely imply coming into existence not within the universe, because everything in the universe is not nothing, as we've said. And so to come into being out of nothing, it would have to somehow come into being outside of the universe, and therefore we wouldn't observe it. So maybe it is happening all the time, but we wouldn't be able to observe it by definition.
Here, I think you're making the same mistake that we talked about earlier when you spoke of the horse coming into being in the living room.
Yeah.
Thinking that therefore it's not out of nothing. And what I explained there was that I'm saying without an efficient cause. That's what I mean by out of nothing. So if things could come into being without an efficient cause, it seems inexplicable why things aren't just popping into existence all around us, things of different sorts, because they don't need efficient causes to bring them into being. This was an argument that A.N. Pryor developed, and I found it just completely convincing.
So let me, how can I put this? A horse, how about an argument like this? Now, I've heard what I think might be this kind of line of argumentation from you before, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. So if someone were to say something like, and it seems absurd on the surface, but if they said something like, well, what if it's the case that you...
My camera's going on. I think it's gone too long. I can't, 2 hours. I think the battery starts to heat and it starts to go out. He says, this is going to sound totally absurd. I know it's going to sound totally ridiculous. I'm asking you as Christians to walk the fine line of rationality. I'm asking you to never have a speck of anything I would think is dumb or laughable, but I'm going to bring up the most redonkulous ideas I possibly can to try to defeat the God hypothesis. He even admits, oh, this is going to sound absolutely absurd, but notice the lengths he has to go to try to get out of the beginning of the universe. Oh, maybe things just begin all the time. Maybe it's happening all over the place. And you know what? This is going to sound absurd, but just listen to my idea, because I don't want to submit to God. I don't want to believe there's a God. I don't want to take on the belief of a God. I would rather take on this belief. Okay, Alex, tell us the belief you would rather take on. Tell us in make-believe world what you would rather believe.
Now, I've heard what I think might be this kind of line of argumentation from you before, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. So if someone were to say something like, and it seems absurd on the surface, but if they said something like, well, what if it's the case that universes are the only thing which can come into being out of nothing, right? A horse can't come into being out of nothing, but there's something about the universe. And we already know that the universe is a special kind of something compared to everything within the universe. It seems to kind of have, we need to think about it in a different way.
Yeah.
Could we not say something like, well, maybe things do come into being all the time, except the only thing that come into being out of nothing is a universe, and therefore we wouldn't be able to observe it?
As Ian Pryor said,
just look at William Lane Craig. He's just like, is this where we're at now? Is this where we're at? To get out of the Kalam cosmological argument, we're going to believe in mereological nihilism. Wholes don't exist, only parts. And when we put labels on them, they magically come into existence. And then somehow the whole universe is not a whole, but it's only made of parts, because that would be the problem of the one and the many. And then we're going to get out of the universe having a beginning, with God. We're going to say that universes can come out of nothing and begin, because that's just what universes do. They just, I know it sounds absurd, but it just comes out of nothing. That's just what it does. It's just a property of a universe that it comes out of nothing.
prior to its existence, the universe doesn't exist so as to constrain what can come into being or not. So you can't say that only things of a certain kind can come into being without efficient causes, because without their causes, there just isn't anything to constrain it.
Yeah, like how in the world would a law even exist that a thing like a universe can come out of a nothing? What principle would even be guiding that? What principle would be guiding universes being able to come out of nothing? Because there would be no thing, there would be no principle to even ascribe to the universe.
So I don't think that you can say that only certain kinds of things can come into being without efficient causes.
Yeah, now the argument that I didn't want to put it in your mouth was one that I've heard elsewhere. People would say the argument that the reason you can't say that only universes can come into being out of nothing is because nothing doesn't have any properties, and so therefore can't have a kind of preference for universes over other things.
Yeah.
My response to that was,
that would be my argument, Alex. That would be one of mine, yes.
To say, what if the necessity of it being a universe is not a property of the nothing, but a property of the thing? And let me explain myself. For example,
the reason why you can't ascribe a property to the universe, that it comes out of nothing, and you would say you're getting around the problem of nothing, is because there would be a time when there would be absolutely nothing. So how would the universe have a property when there is nothing, that it can come out of the nothing? If something can be said so ridiculous as this, it can be mocked and ridiculed. Come on, people. You honestly think us believing in the resurrection, us believing in miracles, the God of the Bible is ridiculous? This is the ridiculousness of this. Because when there is no thing, there is no universe. What would be the guiding principle that now a universe could have in a nothing state to come out of? I don't even know how else to say that.
If we human beings create a circle, it has to be round, right? We can't create a square circle.
Right.
But that's not due to a property of us. That's due to a property of the circle, right?
The property of the circle existed before we drew the circle. That's what Craig is saying. The property of the universe coming out of nothing would have to be inherent in something grounding it. What's grounding that? It has that principle. God holds all knowledge. That's what I've already shared with you. So God holds the knowledge of what a circle is. We just discover it. God holds the knowledge of what a square is. We just discover it. What holds the knowledge? What holds the principle of a universe coming from nothing?
Yeah. So in the same way, although nothing has no properties and so can't prefer universes, what if only universes can come from nothing because of a property of the universe, not because of a property of nothing?
Right. Well, that is exactly what you would have to say, because as you say, properties only inhere in existing things. Beings have properties, not non-being. So you'd actually, it's an inherent property of the universe that it can spring into existence without a cause. And I make sense of that.
Which sounds absurd.
It doesn't.
It sounds absurd. Notice this. They're all laughing. And it's just not like laughing at something that you would eventually come around to and go, oh man, we kind of laughed at physics, or we kind of laughed at gravity. Dude, no, this is laughing at nonsense. Because if words mean anything, they cannot mean this.
And here in existing things, beings have properties, not non-being. So you'd actually, it's an inherent property of the universe that it can spring into existence without a cause. And I make sense of that.
Which sounds absurd.
That doesn't exist come into existence without a cause because it has a property after it's come into existence.
Yeah,
I mean,
it sounds strange, but the reason why I think it's useful to think in those terms, or at least of the possibility of it happening, is because specifically the objection that why don't things pop into existence all the time? I suppose what I'm trying to do is make at least a far-fetched case. I'm trying to show at least a possibility that things could come into existence out of nothing, and yet by definition we'd be incapable of witnessing it. So maybe things do come into existence out of nothing all the time, but because these are only universes, we'll never be able to observe it. We'll never be able to see it.
Yeah. So to get around things coming from nothing, maybe it happens and I never see it. Well, if we're at this point of such deep make-believe where you don't even exist as a whole anymore, unless there's a label given to it, if we're living at such a place of just absurdity where you're not a self, you're just matter in motion, you're just chemicals. And then now we're at a place where, hey, I don't have to demonstrate that, nothing can, or something can come out of nothing because it has that property. I don't have to demonstrate that. I can just simply say there's a possibility because somewhere that no one can even see, that happens. And therefore now I've gotten out of the argument. Does this not just show you how absurd you have to be to try to get out of arguments that are rational? This is the land of absurdity. And this is why I don't let the fool get answered beyond this. I thank God for William Lane Craig here, but to me, I would just be done. I'd be like, you have contradicted yourself and common sense, and you talk about special pleading and have appealed to so much absurdity in this conversation to go against the most common understanding of things that begin to exist have a cause, that there is no more point in doing this, because now if I use your same folly against you, I can just say everything about God. God exists somewhere. You don't have to see him. God can do whatever he wants. You don't have to make sense of it. It can sound absurd and strange. I mean, literally, I don't even have to try anymore to explain God through his principles. I don't have to explain the Bible to you. I don't have to do anything with you anymore. I can just say, accept the absurdity, because that's what you do in your worldview. And look at it highlighted right here. Look at rather the peak. This is the peak of this.
Not non-being. So actually, it's an inherent property of the universe that it can spring into existence without a cause. And I just don't make sense of that.
Which sounds absurd.
Something that doesn't exist come into existence without a cause because it has a property after it's come into existence.
Yeah, it sounds strange, but the reason why I think it's useful to think in those terms, or at least of the possibility of it happening, is because specifically the objection that why don't things pop into existence all the time? I suppose what I'm trying to do is make at least a far-fetched case. I'm trying to show at least a possibility that things could come into existence out of nothing, and yet by definition we'd be incapable of witnessing it. So maybe things do come into existence out of nothing all the time, but because these are only universes, we'll never be able to observe it. We'll never be able to see it.
Let me commend you for your method, Alex, because by pushing these questions, what you help the atheist to see is...
Now notice this. Notice this backhanded compliment. I commend you, Alex. I commend you, because what you have done is you have helped atheists and me as a Christian show how redonkulous it is to hold the views that you have to try to get out of my argument. That's basically what he's saying. Let me just rewind this a little bit here. He's literally going to thank him for being the fool that everyone can see it as. Not saying that he's not a smart guy. I'm saying to present folly to us.
Things do come into existence out of nothing all the time, but because these are only universes, we'll never be able to observe it. We'll never be able to see it.
Let me commend you for your method, Alex, because by pushing these questions, what you help the atheist to see is the intellectual price tag of his atheism. And I think that's very valuable. One of the goals of the Christian apologist will be to try to raise the intellectual price tag of non-belief. And if non-belief or non-theism requires me to be a neurological belief, and I think that's very valuable. One of the goals of the Christian apologist will be to try to raise the intellectual price tag of non-belief. And if
this is a real laugh. I love him, man. When I rebuke, correct, and all of that, I never want to make it personal. I love this young man. I pray for him. I am not mocking him. I'm not pausing him to make him look silly, man. I'm just pausing. I'm like this. Look at that thought hit that brain right there. Look at that thought. He's like, oh, yeah, I did. I did just help you. I did, didn't I? Yes, you did. We love you, Alex. We pray for you. I pray for you in the name of Jesus to come and know him personally. But that's just what you just got rocked by the best, man, because there's no other way except to see it as ridiculous, man. There's no other way to see it. You've just brought up total absurdity. You've brought up, you want to talk about coping mechanisms or trying to get around things. Like sometimes atheists mock us and say, oh, when you guys try to harmonize the Bible or do this and that, man, you want to, that we go to far lengths and stuff. I go to a far length when one gospel says there was one blind man and another one says there was two. And guess what? Whenever there's two, there's one. Oh, you're coping. You're coping to try to save. What a rescue device to save your Bible from contradictions. Or there was a census here, and Luke doesn't mention it, but there's a census he does mention it. Oh, and there could be two censuses by the same king. Oh, you're coping. You're coping. Oh, look at the contradiction. Which, by the way, I'll never talk Bible contradiction with people who can't, the atheist unbeliever who takes the sassy approach to my worldview. And yet now, Alex, you're realizing, bro, you're coping. You're so outside of rationality to hold the last little thread you're holding on to in your mind. Just let go and let God, dude. He fills in the blanks. You don't have to hold on to this redonkulous belief system anymore, dude. Let it go. Let it go and let God, man. Let God fill in the blanks, and you can go back to doing science with God. You can go back to doing philosophy with God. It will be amazing when you do it with him.
Non-believer, non-theism requires me to be a mereological nihilist, to think that things have an intrinsic property that they can come into being that other things don't have. This is all raising the intellectual price tag of non-belief. For me, at least, Alex, just way beyond what I'm willing to pay. And so that's helpful that you're doing this.
That is a really, really interesting way of thinking about apologetics and the argument that we're having. It's kind of like, what's the better deal here, right? Because both worldviews seem at least consistent, but you've got to ask yourself, how much you're willing to sacrifice.
No, Alex. No. They both don't seem consistent. Not at all. Not at all. You did not just equal what we had on the table. It couldn't even get off the ground. Mereological nihilism doesn't even get off the ground. You don't even exist in it. It's over, my friend. It's over. May the Lord bless you. May he save you. May he bring you close to him. And last but not least, as I said, I'll be taking my time in this podcast. I haven't even got to the length of one of my favorite movies, Lord of the Rings. I haven't even got to it yet. I'm still holding on to under 3 hours if you're still with me. I'm now going to show you Derek from Myth Vision, the guy who just loves to dunk on Christians with all of their mythology and how it's so similar to all of these other myths. Notice how God uses Jay Dyer within a few moments to shatter this man's argumentation. Because without God, without a standard, my friend, you don't know truth from myth. And I will show you, let me write this down so I do not forget. That is exactly what Bertrand Russell taught, as well as we saw with Alex Rosenburg. The line between truth and myth doesn't even exist unless you think physics is talking to you. Okay, let's go here.
That the regularity in nature maintains, right? If the regularity didn't maintain, we wouldn't be able to explain anything because it wouldn't maintain its identity over time. So if your premise one is a miracle based on your naturalistic view is something that can't be explained definitionally by the laws of physics and the regularity of nature, which is the other way you explain things in reality, right? I'm saying those things themselves can't get explained by those laws. They just exist, right?
Honestly, to be honest with you, Jim Bob, it sounds like a word game to try and convince people that I somehow accept a miracle when I don't.
Yeah. The problem is Myth Vision is you don't know what you don't know. That's the problem. The Dunning-Kruger effect is fully upon your life. You think because you've dabbled into studying the literature of the Bible that you understand anything that the Bible is trying to do. The Bible is not trying to convince you through the Bible to have some type of a worldview that is that equivalent to somebody in Sunday school. That the Bible is doing is showing you what God did and what he does and what he will do. So deal with it. When you start mocking that God and you start ridiculing that God, we're going to take you to places like Genesis 1:1. In the beginning was God. And then we're going to ask you now to erase God and put something else there in the beginning, because we believe God is that which explains the universe, the heavens, the earth. We believe Jesus's words are the foundation for all truth. Any house, any system not built on it will be crumbled by the storms of life. You want to mess with our Jesus, we're now messing with your foundations. What you got You don't have any. You assume our truth. You assume our logic. You assume history. You assume our morals. You assume our regularity, and you have no explanation for it. And that is what that young man was holding you to, or this gentleman. And then Jay, to be the icing on the cake, is going to come in and help you out.
It's a logical in this case. We're talking about rising from the dead. We're talking about things that we've read in ancient texts, and here we are playing this game. Can you define the meaning of truth by the word truth?
Yeah. The reason why we're doing that is because in a world where God creates, miracles are nothing. It's his prerogative. In a world that I create in cartoons, dead people can come alive all the time. I do in Halo when I play their video game. See, what we're trying to do is you're trying to say because there's miracles in the Bible, it's myth. Because there's things that you don't like a part of reality and you want to mock it. We're now saying to you, you explain reality then, son. You explain it, Derek. You think you know so much about reality. You're going to make fun of Christians for believing in miracles. It's your turn. When you left Christianity and deconverted, you now became a non-theist. That's by you. You could have became 100 other things, but by you and your confession began to oppose theistic beliefs, consider it all myth, and then mock it. Now you explain reality as a non-theist. We're not giving you rationality. We're not giving you the universe as a starting place. We're not giving you these principles as something that you can have and use to try to whoop our God with. Our God stands above you like a human stands above an ant times a million. So deal with it. I love how one, I think he's like a new ager. He said, this is what the secular world says. You know, the non-believers, give us one miracle, the universe and all of its laws, and we'll explain the rest. No, we don't give that to you. That's why we're messing with you now. That's why you can't explain what you believe, because no one has held your feet to the fire like that. You just come up and start, whispering like a snake. Well, this is what the Bible says. And now somebody's asking you, why should anybody care about rationality? Why should anybody care about truth from fiction or fiction from nonfiction? Why should anybody care about myth or reality? In your worldview, you explain it to us.
And stuff like that. And I'm going like, I
understand.
I don't see a miracle in any of that. I don't understand facts. And here we are.
The reason why you can't explain is because you don't have an answer, nor do your boys, nor do your modern day prophets and sages. They can't explain it either, son. They don't got nothing for you either. They leave, too. They leave laughing and giggling at their own worldview when they face William Lane Craig. That's where you're left, because we're not going to do Bible studies with you about the contradictions or the similarities of myth. We're not doing that with you. We're asking you to show us why you're a you. We're asking you to show us why there's regularity in nature. We're asking you why there's a tomorrow where the laws apply from what we discovered today. That's the problem of induction from Hume. We're asking you now to solve these problems. Can you do it, sir? No, you can't, but you're going to clutch pearls when Jay gets on.
Can't get explained by those laws. They just exist, right?
Honestly, to be honest with you, Jim Bob, it sounds like a word game to try and convince people that I somehow accept a miracle when I don't.
Just want to say this one more time. That's what they say, and they put under the comments. I'm just going to delete it if I see them. Just remove comments altogether. It's not a word game. You don't get it. You don't understand it. You are outside of your depths. You are beyond where you should be, son. And you need to humble yourself and listen to Christians, because if you didn't get this out of Christianity, then you didn't understand Christianity. If I ever left Christianity, there is no way that I would ever try to debate a Christian when it came down to these things, because I, like Alex Rosenburg, would not only believe what he did, I would believe it to the nth of becoming a seeker of pleasure. I would be wanting the greatest amount of pleasure, and to argue God with people would not be pleasureful. But once again, these guys as chemicals make them do it. But I wouldn't even try to convince a Christian of this, because I would understand from having been a Christian that there is no way around this. You just bite the bullet like Alex O'Connor did and just go on with your life. Go eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow we all die.
It's just a logical in this case. We're talking about rising from the dead. We're talking about things that we've read in ancient texts, and here we are playing this game. Can you define the meaning of truth by the word truth and stuff like that? And I'm going like, I understand. I don't see a miracle in any of that, though. I don't understand that. Truth and stuff like that.
Hello, Jay.
You got an echo, Dyer.
There he goes. Right. That's all I really want to run with you, Derek. I know you have to eat, but this is one guest who wanted to come on and ask a couple questions. Jay.
Me? Oh yeah, am I the guest?
Yeah, you're the guest now.
Well, it seems like the argument rests on an assumption of the things that you already know what things are and are not possible. And I mean, maybe it's right, the criterion that you've chosen. I think you appeal to things like scientists and stuff like that. But how do you know that you've chosen the right criteria for what is and isn't possible? Like what's the basis for that choice?
I just want to show you in the next 5 minutes how somebody who has a channel with hundreds of thousands of people who thinks he's debunking the Bible the whole time, what happens when he's asked a simple question of how do you even know your criteria is right? Like this is why, honestly, you guys think, because there's the example of somebody can be playing chess and then a pigeon come down, knock over the pieces and poop on the board and think they won. You guys think we're the pigeon. You 100% unbelievers are that little nasty pigeon, because this is what happens when we ask you to even explain your principles. We put our principles in God. Tell me your principle of contradiction, non-contradiction, going back to my slides here, because remember today, I'm not in a hurry. I'm taking my time. I'm doing the work that I want to do in this subject, and then I'll decide by God's grace if I add a comment section or whatever. But whoever listens to this that may enjoy it, I praise God for you. Thanks for stopping by. And even for the non-believer, thank you for coming and taking your licking, because the Bible says if you don't take your licking, you're a bastard child. But if God loves you, he disciplines those he loves. And godly discipline, restorative discipline, not just punitive to help you. This is a rebuke to help you. God rebukes those he loves. He corrects those he loves. See, what right now Jay is asking him is, what do you value? Why do you value A over B? How do you know a difference between what is a myth and you're going to laugh at it to what something is not a myth? And I got it right here. I got Russell, because if he says, well, I do it by induction. Do you not realize that just Alex O'Connor's lecture, how it comes into this? If you're doing it by induction, nothing is anything except particles. And so there is no greater miracle of a particle raising someone from the dead or a miracle of it becoming a chair. It is all just particles rearranging themselves. And then Bertrand Russell said, that was Alex O'Connor, and then in Bertrand Russell's worldview, if you don't have a grounding for your values to get over Hume's problem of induction, there is no difference between sanity and insanity. And then if you want to run over here to Rosenburg and have science talk to you like it does on Sesame Street, you have contradicted yourself, because science doesn't exist outside of the mind. So whose mind is science in to begin with? And so this idea that all he does, myth vision, is does internal critiques, which means like, you know what? I'm not going to hold on to my worldview. I'm just going to assume the worldview of a Christian. And then I'm going to look at the Bible and say, if I were a Christian, how would this story make sense? And what we're saying to you is, we don't care what you think when you look at our Bible, because you don't even have permission to come into our Bible and make critiques and make value statements, because you have no basis to be a critiquer. You have no basis to be a value decider. And that is what Jay brings up here quickly. And then you're just going to watch him melt down. And I won't play the whole video, but you watch him melt down. I'll just let it play through here now.
You're talking to me?
Yeah.
I would just go with based on my observations and experiences and those of countless other critical scholars who evaluate this literature, and recognizing that we're dealing with legendary materials, just like Suetonius discusses the birth of Augustus through Apollo, several divine births in antiquity, but you have the miracle of Jesus' birth, and they look literarily very similar. I mean, very, very close linguistically. In fact, Plutarch talks about the birth of Plato by a virgin, Plato's mother being a virgin, by the pneuma and the dynamos, the power and the spirit. Plutarch's writing, somewhat contemporaneous to the gospel literature, we're dealing with legend. And so this is what I would say when I observe that material and I see legendary genre, like a category today we would fit Batman or Superman or something in today's fiction, they would do something in antiquity similar to that. So when I look at that in a heuristic way, comparing the literature to other literature, I would across the board say they're all acting and looking, walking like a duck, talking like a duck, and they're a duck. That's why I would say.
By that definition, though, the evolutionary account of the origin of human beings would also be mythological, right?
I think we evolved, but you would disagree with me.
No, but I'm saying by your standard, that would also be mythology now.
So he's going to bring it back to what is evolution, but just modern mythology, because it looks like the mythology of the past, you know, that a bunch of things change over time, came from a primordial soup and all this. This is where these gods came from and they evolved. He's going to say to them, you think the Bible sounds like mythology? Everything can sound like mythology, dude. How do you know the difference between what is real and what is fake?
You know,
what would
the evolutionary account of human beings and their arising from the sea? I mean, Anaximander says that, and he gives a kind of a quasi-mythological account. So does that count as mythology that we throw out, or is that a solid theory?
As far as
do you understand what he's doing to Jay? He's saying you look at the Bible and you go, well, I'm comparing it to this other thing I know is myth. And then the Bible, and it's like that, so it must be myth. So if a story talks about miracles, and there's another story that talks about miracles, and that's myth, and I look at that story that talks about miracles, and it's like that other story, then that must mean they're both myth. Jay, Jay's now saying, well, then you don't believe in evolution then, right? Because science looks just like myth too. You know, the real world looks just like the Marvel world. Hey, they go here, they go to their job, they do this, they do that. How do you know the difference between one world and the other? How do you know which one is myth and which is real? What is your standard to be between describing what is real and what is not real. What inductive method can you do to test the method of induction? The one you're using right now. How do you not know we're in the matrix? I mean, this thing can go on forever. I'm going to try to interrupt so much, but he's simply holding him to this, and it confuses him. It confuses him. He literally thinks Jay is trying to argue against evolution right now. That's not what Jay is doing. Jay is just taking what he believes as something that he thinks is scientifically true and just saying, how do you know that's not myth? Because it sounds like what you would call myths in the pagan religions.
Anaximander?
The evolutionary account that then they're arising from the sea. I mean, Anaximander says that, and he gives a kind of a quasi-mythological account. So does that count as mythology that we throw out, or is that a solid theory?
As far as Anaximander?
The evolutionary account that I just outlined. Your criteria would cancel out his origins of human beings as mythology.
Yeah, I would say that creation myths all across the board in antiquity are trying to explain ecologically.
Now, in other words, evolutionary origins fit your standard of mythology that should be tossed out. What about
why would they fit that? Where's the ancient textbook describing fossil records and going into the science of these things?
The criteria.
Well, then you would say there's also data, there's also archaeology, there's also
right. There's several facets.
I asked for the criteria though about what cancels out myth versus fact.
Well, that's why I said observable. I would look at the observations.
He just doesn't get it. Jay just stated it clearly. I want to know what is your criteria from what is myth and what is fact. And then he runs back to science. And remember, as we've shown, nothing in science can be absolutely proven, or what we would say scientifically proven, because you don't prove it in that way. It is your best guess. And so it's your job as the scientist to take on the data and make a decision. So you as the scientist are the final arbiter over something that can be considered a valid theory or just merely an opinion. And Derek does not understand that. He's simply saying, well, if we find something in science, then it's automatically a fact and it's no longer a myth like what you guys believe. And science is not about certainty. Science is about finding the most reliable way of thinking at the present level of knowledge. Notice the very expression that something can be scientifically proven. What is this ad right here? Something can be scientifically proven is a contradiction in terms. There is nothing that is scientifically proven. The core of science is just an awareness of we have wrong ideas and prejudices, and then to try to work through those to find the best vision so far of reality. And so now it comes back down to you as the viewer of reality, which, remember, if you do not believe in God, there is no you to even decide if you are a good observer or a bad observer of reality. I hope that you get that, because that's what I brought in right up here. I'm going to show it again. Not only does it have to do with our values, like how we make value statements, but number two question is, why are you even a thinking observer? And then, of course, under that, a subpoint under being a thinking observer is, how do you even know you're valuing things the right way? What is your criteria between something being tested enough to help me understand reality to something being rejected and it doesn't understand reality? What is the criteria? When does something go from being just a best guess to something that's being more certain? How do you value the knowledge you're getting? What is the deciding factor? Remember, if we're all just goo through the zoo to you, there is no logic. There is no certainty. It is just chemicals in the brain spouting off what they think they know. And that's what Jay is doing his best to share with this person here.
Wait a minute, did you observe any of that?
No, and I didn't see Suetonius talk about Augustus' birth. He might be the chosen one, and Jesus is a false prophet. We don't know that.
They're trying to get Derek to say that he's appealing to authority, and the answer is obviously yes. He is.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, I'm going to appeal to.
I didn't ask about an appeal to authority. I'm talking about now the criteria is observation, empirical observation.
Well, I'm saying you can look at these texts and compare this material and see what. There's several scholars out there that work in this to show we're dealing with literature. We're dealing with literature. People are reading literature.
I'm asking an epistemological question. This which is not answered by just saying that we look at the literature and scholars.
Okay, what do you want to know?
So the criteria that you set up, your epistemic criteria, was on what basis? I'm asking on what basis, and you said it's the things that don't.
Epistemic and epistemological just has to do with knowing. He's asking him for a standard. He's not asking for more guys that are like him. He's asking, how do you have a standard to differentiate between myth and fiction in your world?
Appear to be mythological based on various scholars. And then I said, well, by that standard, certain things that you do, which is not answered by just saying that we look at the literature and scholars.
Compare this material and see what. There's several scholars out there that work in this to show we're dealing with literature. We're dealing with literature. People are reading literature.
I'm asking an epistemological question. This which is not answered by just saying that we look at the literature and scholars.
Okay, what do you want to know?
So the criteria that you set up, your epistemic criteria, was On what basis? I'm asking on what basis, and you said it's the things that don't appear to be mythological based on various scholars. And then I said, well, by that standard, certain things that you do believe would also be mythology, like the Big Bang would count as that. I'm assuming you believe that. I don't know. If you
I think it's an outdated model now, but
okay. Well, I mean, whatever origin myth you want doesn't match up to the standard of empirical verification.
Okay.
So you have an arbitrary standard. If you need me to spell it out for you.
Okay, and you don't.
So what's the justification for?
But you don't. I'm asking you. Do you?
No, I think if I believe in theism and I believe in divine revelation, I have a basis for epistemology and those kinds of standards. So I'm just trying to figure out what yours is.
Right. It would be based on the physical. It would be based on physical, observable, testable, and even observational things like literature.
But you already said that all of these origin theories that you believe go outside of your empirical evidence.
What do I believe?
Did you observe the origins of the human?
No. That's where authority comes in, like Neil brought up. That I would rely on scholars and expert scientists.
How do you know you've chosen the right scholars?
How do you?
How do you know you've chosen the right scholars? Okay, I don't have time to continue to watch this whooping, the whooping behind the shed, and I promised you I would allow you guys to come up if anybody is here and would like to challenge me. I do not do online debates. I will not set up one. I do not do that. I do not care to do that. Thank God for people like Jay calling to his show. For those who do that, I am not going to do that. I will not chat debate. I am putting this information out for people to listen to and observe. If you are an unbeliever and you have made it through this and you want to have a discussion about it, the requirement is for you to answer those 4 questions. And those 4 questions are, why is there something rather than nothing? Or why is there this kind of something rather than another kind of something? Number 2, then you have to go to number 2. Why are you a thinking observer? Number 3, why does logic and science work? And why be truthful in this discussion? And hopefully I might go over that again. But now I want to show you Bertrand Russell here, in his book, A History of Western Civilization. Let me put it up here. And just as I said before, there's a lot of things shared online. And I think I've heard somebody mention this from his book, but it was no reason at all to why I already had the book when I heard him mention this as a Christian. So I just want to be very clear, even though I know sometimes people think we as Christians are just parroting each other. I just want to be very clear here that that's not what I'm doing. I went and got these books. I studied them. As I told you about my first interaction with Bertrand Russell when I was in Bible college, and just, like how disappointed I was that it was even a thing that people were holding on to, like thinking he was amazing. It just wasn't my thing. I'll tell you that. Okay. So here, it looks like you can see it pretty easily. Okay. Now, see here. Okay. I have so much of this highlighted because it answers the fool and their folly, just like Alex Rosenburg did. Okay. Now, I could almost do a whole nother live cast just on this. I don't even know how far I should go back into this. Okay. Well, let me just start here. Let me read to you from the chat. Give me the problem of induction from Hume like a 4th grader. Okay. Let me give you this because that's what he's dealing with here. That will help people understand what I'm doing. Okay. And then, and then I can show you how he's trying to answer it. All right. The problem of induction, as explained by philosopher David Hume, is all about how we come to believe that certain things will happen based on what has happened in the past. Induction is basically like the scientific method. Imagine you have a pet dog. Every day when you give your dog food, it eats the food. So you start to believe whenever I give my dog food, it will eat. But how do you know that this will always happen? What if one day your dog doesn't eat? You only believe the dog will eat because that's what it's always done before. Hume's problem, remember, he was an atheist. He always mocked God and different things, or had problems with God. Hume's problem is this: just because something has happened in the past doesn't guarantee it will happen in the future. He then asks, how can we really know that the future will be like the past? So it keeps getting deeper here. We tend to think things will keep happening the same way, like the rising sun every day, but we can't prove that it will. It's just that we have an expectation based on past experience. That's the problem of induction. We make guesses about the future based on the past, but we can't be absolutely sure about those guesses being right. Now, my camera has gone out, so I'm going to let it chill here just for a little bit. Okay, so you will not see me for the next little bit because I'm coming on 3 hours of using this camera, and my room is a little bit hot here. So let me just make sure you can still hear me, even though you can't see me, which it does look like everything's okay. Let me make sure. Okay, cool. You can't see me. I'm just going to Oops, thank you so much. That would have been a long time of me talking by myself. Okay, so I got to have myself on stage for you to hear me, but you'll see a nice little pretty black box there. Okay, thank you. Okay, Hume's philosophy. This is Bertrand Russell here on the history of Western philosophy. Hume's philosophy, whether true or false, represents the bankruptcy of the 18th century reasonableness. Now notice this, whether it's true or false, it doesn't matter. It just represents, in Russell's mind, the bankruptcy of just being a person that believes in scientism, because you can't resolve it one way or the other. Whether Hume was right or not, you still can't resolve it, because how do you do science without first relying upon the regularity of the world, the natural order? How do you do science? You can't without relying upon logic. You can't. So whether or not Hume was right to bring up his problem, or how his problem is worded, whether that's right or not, it represents the bankruptcy of 18th century reasonableness. And that is what most people, atheists, argue like today, like they did in the 18th century. Oh, Jesus is just a myth, and you know what? We can just rely upon science and scientism. That explains everything. No, it's bankrupt. Not only did it have problems according to Hume, but it's bankrupt according to Russell. He starts out, like Locke, who's another philosopher, with the intention of being sensible and empirical, taking nothing on trust, but seeking whatever instruction is to be obtained from experience and observation. Is that what Derek from Myth Vision is trying to do? Isn't that what Alex O'Connor is trying to do? Isn't that what they're trying to do? But here, you're going to notice there's a problem. But having a better intellect than Locke, which means he's a little bit smarter than Locke, a greater acuteness and analysis, and a smaller capacity for accepting comfortable inconsistencies, he arrives at the disastrous conclusion that from experience and observation, nothing is learned. I wish I could highlight this again, but it won't let me do it. Literally, nothing is learned from experience and observation if you want to bring it down to its base understanding of how we learn and what something is. Even as I read to you before that there's no certainty in science, not only does Hume and the others show that there's no certainty, there is actually no knowledge in these endeavors. Nor can one line of action be more rational than another. So notice this, there is no difference between rationality and absurdity when you don't have a way around these problems, okay? Where am I at here? Okay. There is no such, where did I go? Is great acuteness. Okay. There is no such thing as a rational belief. If we believe that fire warms us or water refreshes, 'tis only because it costs us too much pains to think otherwise. We cannot help believing, but no belief can be grounded in reason. So nothing is learned from experience and observation. Nor can one line of action be more rational than another, since all alike are based upon irrational convictions. So notice, the moment you are in this trap, nothing can be rational now because they are based on irrational convictions. I will send this to anybody. If I allow the chats, I don't even know, but I will send this to anybody that thinks they can do better then Bertrand Russell, Hume, and so forth to disprove them. Hopefully my camera will hold up now. I will send this to anybody. Tell me where your rational ground is to do science. Well, I just do it and it works and everybody else agrees with me. Everybody else is just looking at the same thing you are, and they have no basis to show that that actually exists or will be there tomorrow. We could all be in the matrix. We could all be a brain in a vat. There is no foundation for anything we do. You cannot merely assert it. And as Hume was known for, he was not comfortable with accepting inconsistencies. See, the problem with today's so-called scientists, as we were seeing before with Rosenburg and the like, is they are comfortable with their inconsistencies. They are comfortable saying there's no eye, there's only an illusion of an eye, and then talking about an eye the whole time. They are comfortable with saying that everything we observe has a beginning of an existence, but the universe doesn't really actually have to fall under that because it's all just aggregates of parts being rearranged. And if we do want to know where it came from itself out of nothing as a property. You see, they are comfortable with these inconsistencies, but Hume wasn't. We cannot help but believing, but no belief can be grounded in reason. No one line of action can be more rational than another, since all alike are based upon irrational convictions. This last conclusion, however, Hume seems to not have drawn. So he didn't even come to that. So Hume doesn't even take it far enough. Even in his most skeptical chapter, in which he sums up the conclusions of his book. Don't know why I can't just page turn on this. So crazy. There we go. Where are we at? Even in his most skeptical chapter, in which he sums up the conclusion of his book, he says, generally speaking, the errors in religion are dangerous. Those in philosophy, only ridiculous. Now, notice this. Notice how he has self-awareness, but y'all listening to me do not have self-awareness. Hume says, yeah, generally speaking, there's errors in religion. That's what he believes. They're dangerous. The ones in philosophy, they're ridiculous. But remember, without having a God, he doesn't even know what ridiculous is. Now, notice who points that out. Do I point that out? No. Who points that out? Russell points that out in his book in the very next sentence. He has no right to say this. Dangerous is a causal word, and as a skeptic as to causation cannot know that anything is dangerous. Oh, religion is dangerous. Religion is dangerous. You have no value system. Remember, Rosenburg says you have no value system. There is no good, bad, or ugly. There is no wicked or evil. As Dawkins says, blind, pitiless indifference. And even here, Russell's pushing Hume even further. In fact, in the later portions of the treatise, Hume forgets all about his fundamental doubts. So then when they want to be sure, they're sure. But when they want to be honest, they'll be doubtful. And writes much as any other enlightened moralist of his time might have written. He applies to his doubts the remedy that he recommends, namely carelessness and inattention. In a sense, his skepticism is insincere, since he cannot maintain it in practice. So why don't you practice what you preach, atheists? Practice what you preach. You say that there's no such thing as morals. Why do you keep living with morals? You say there's no such thing as a God. Why do you keep using logic? Why aren't you just insane, rambling on? In a sense, his skepticism is insincere, since he cannot maintain it in practice. It has, however, this awkward consequence that it paralyzes every effort to prove one line of action better than the other. Paralysis. Let me get this word here. P-A-R-L-Y-S-E-S. Yes, the loss of, well, he's spelling it with an E, paralysis. I'm going to make sure I'm getting this word right. I want this word right here. P-A-R-A-Y-S-E-S. I'm not familiar with that word. Don't want to make it up. Is it just supposed to be an I there? Yeah, it just keeps telling me that it's paralysis, supposed to be an I. Okay. It has, however, this awkward consequence that it immobilizes, let's just use that word, immobilizes, see if it fits, immobilizes every effort to prove one line of action better than the other. Absolutely. And thank you, sister. Older spelling or just a misspell. Every good book has them, right? Okay. It was inevitable that such a self-reputation of rationality should be followed by a great outburst of irrational faith. So notice that those trying to refute what they thought to be irrational faith then stumbled upon self-refutation of rationality itself. So in other words, by pointing one finger at the beliefs of the church, there were four more fingers pointing back at them as they were trying to say the Bible was irrational with miracles and so forth. There was all this irrationality pointing back at them, because where does rationality come from? How do you know you have one standard over another? How does logic work? Where does the universe come from? Where does causality come from? Where does the continuation of things, regularity of nature? The quarrel between Hume and Rousseau is symbolic. Rousseau was mad but influential. Hume, well, here we go. Now help me out. Hume was sane but had no followers. See, look at it. They're all crazy in a sense. And even though he's sane, he's still trying to follow his own view, but he did it inconsistently, according to Russell. Subsequent British empiricists, these are those who just live by what they can see, think they're so smart, more smarter than God, because they just look at, evidence and so forth. British empiricists rejected his skepticism without refuting it. So notice that you can reject it, and people will try, but they don't refute it. Rousseau and his followers agreed with Hume that no belief is based on reason, but thought the heart superior to reason and allowed it to lead them to convictions very different from those that Hume retained in practice. German philosophers from Kant to Hegel had not assimilated Hume's arguments. Okay, so he's not buying Kant's arguments, which I do, I believe. I say this deliberately in spite of the belief which many philosophers share with Kant, which I would be one, that his criticisms of pure reason answered Hume. I believe it did. In fact, these philosophers, at least Kant and Hegel, represent a pre-Humean type of rationalism and can be refuted by Humean arguments. No, they can't, because we ground it in God. If you don't ground it in God, you can be refuted, but you can ground it in God with Kant arguments. Okay? The philosophers who cannot be refuted in this way are those who do not pretend to be rational, such as Rousseau, Schopenhauer, and Nietzsche. Notice, they do not pretend to be rational. The growth of unreason throughout the 19th century and what has passed off at the 20th century is a natural sequel to Hume's destruction of empiricism. Okay? It is therefore important to discover whether there is any answer to Hume within the framework of philosophy that is wholly or mainly empirical. So have we answered Hume even up into his time, which is into our modern time? Okay. Bio of Russell. He lived, I believe he died in the 60s or 70s. Bio of Bertrand Russell. Okay. And you can also look this up, 1970. That's when he passed. You can look this up. The problem of human induction on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. They have not answered it. There have been people who have proposed ideas, but they have not answered it. It is therefore important to discover whether there is any answer to Hume within the framework of a philosophy that is wholly or mainly empirical. And that's, remember, we talked about that, which people are trying to do now. They're trying to argue like he did in the 18th century. Right? I do not like this program on my Windows. I like it better on my Mac. Okay. Now notice this here. Remember, we read this. This is Russell on Hume. Hume's philosophy, whether true or false, represents the bankruptcy of 18th century reasonableness. And that's what people are repeating now, this kind of scientism. Okay. And notice what now Russell says. It is therefore important to discover whether there's any answer to Hume within the framework of a philosophy that's wholly or mainly empirical. And that's what most people are doing. It's either mainly or wholly empirical. If not, notice what he says. There is no intellectual difference between sanity and insanity. If you can't resolve this, you cannot resolve the difference between sanity and insanity. The lunatic who believes that he is a poached egg is to be condemned solely on the ground that he is a minority, or rather, since we must not assume democracy, on the ground that the government does not agree with him. This is a desperate point of view, and it must be hoped that there is some way of escaping it. And there is no way of escaping it. Now, notice here how he ends his chapter. What these arguments prove, and I do not think the proof can be controverted, is that induction is an independent logical principle incapable of being inferred either from experience or from other logical principles, and that without this principle, science is impossible. So how does he get around Hume's problem? He inserts the principle of science. That's it. That's all he does. He just inserts it. Hume's skepticism rests entirely upon his rejection of the principle of induction. And he just talks about what induction is. Okay, and Hume rejects it. The principle itself cannot, of course, without circularity, you have to use circularity. So all those who say we argue for God in the circle or we're special pleading, that's exactly what you have to do for this. The principle that beats the skepticism, okay, that principle cannot be done without circularity. It has to be it cannot be inferred from observed uniformity, since it's required to justify any such inference. Okay, it must be therefore or be deduced from an independent principle, not based on experience. To this extent, Hume has proved that pure empiricism is not a sufficient basis for science. Well, science works, and that's why I'm a scientist, and that's why science is what it is. And that's how he ends. He just asserts the principle. It just is what it is. That's all he basically has said. My friends, I'm going to now put up my link. I don't know if anybody wants to join. I don't know how long I'll leave up comments under this, because I could care less what people have to say that do not want to bite the bullet. If you just want to assert to me that the world is the way it is, that laws work the way they work, and then otherwise you can't know the difference between sanity and insanity, then I'm just going to say God is what it is, and I insert the principle of God. That's it. That's it. Now, I want to go on from those other questions, but literally all I gave you through all of the lectures that I went through is people's failed answers of trying to give us what we would call the steps of knowledge to have a conversation to discover truth. Let's go back to how we started this, as it's up there, the link, to see if anybody will join. Remember that I shared with you from the very beginning here. What did I share with you? What is truth? I believe Jesus is truth. Okay? You don't believe that? That's okay. Tell me what you put in the place of God then. What explains all the things that I'm using for God? If you don't have one, then you have no right to critique the other one. How do I know it's God? Logical necessity, the impossibility of the contrary, personal experience. Okay? We went through that. Now, here are those questions that I mentioned before. Why is there something why is there this something rather than another something? Why are you a thinking observer? Number 2. Number 3, why does logic and science work? And number 4, why be truthful in this discussion? None of the people we just went through can answer this other than by admitting they're in contradiction or just simply asserting whatever they want to assert to be true. I've then asked anybody who wants to come and debate these 3 things. Thank you, sister. God bless you. You're one of the only people who've joined. I feel like I'm just a madman shouting in the wind, but I had to do this for my last video. You can either concede and then humbly learn from a Christian. That's what you can do as an unbeliever. Hey, man, I don't have the answers to this, but I've been skeptical of Christianity and I walked away, but I want to learn. I'm an unbeliever, whatever. I'm an atheist from a Hindu background, whatever. You can concede. You do not have rational answers to those questions like all your friends before you have done, and they just cope and throw in whatever works for them to get past those discomforts that they have. You can concede and lead from Christians. Or 2, you can try to give your answers now. You can take off where Russell left and try to tell me why you're just asserting that principle. Because where does that principle come from? Is he a Platonic now? Does he believe in the world, a Platonist? Does he believe in the world of forms? Does he just believe there's a principle called the principle of induction and regularity somewhere floating out there in the world of forms? Like how on Sesame Street, the word science can talk and bounce around, because that's all he did. He just asserted his make-believe principle. That's the smartest among you. And he even admits that Hume and all the rest couldn't even do any better than him because they didn't have an answer. But his answer is just to throw in a make-believe principle. Do your best to give me your answers. I don't care what you think about anything else. Tell me your answers to these questions. I don't want to hear you tell me what you think about the Bible, about the land of Canaan, about the stories of the Middle Eastern people, how Yahweh and Elohim, JEPD theories. I don't give a rip about any of that, because I want to know first and foremost, how do you get out of the problems that have been presented to you today? I get out of them by asserting God, that it's impossible to have these answers without God. And as Alex Rosenburg said, without God, you don't even have yourself. You don't even exist. So answer them. Otherwise, number 3, leave and move on. And we bid you farewell. And other Christians who do not have these parameters might play ball with you. As I said from the beginning, I've come to play 21. You want to play horse? Go play horse with somebody else. I wanted to show as a Christian, as a pastor, how much I cared about unbelievers. And I would present this knowledge to you, and I'm willing to engage with you, but it's in this way. I don't engage the other way. I'm not playing the game, was Jesus a myth? I'm not doing the Derek myth vision stuff with you, because I want to do what Jay Dyer did with Derek from Myth Vision. Show him, how do you even know what to value? You want to do, some of these guys want to do internal critiques of Christianity. Well, how do we know what's myth? How do we know what's true? How do you know what to value? Where do your value statements come from? Have you answered Hume's problem? Have you just taken the simplistic, spiritual Oompa Loompa answer of Russell and just asserted a principle out of the middle of nowhere? I want to know where your value decider comes from. Why are you a value decider? And how do I know that you can make the right value judgments between a myth and something that's true, or fact or fiction? You don't even know where fact or fiction came from. You don't even know the difference. And there is no difference according to Hume, and unless you're willing to just assert a principle like Russell, which I want to know if you have the courage to do that, because I wish I could have debated Russell. I would say, where does that principle reside? Because if you're going to say it resides in matter, space, and time, then show it to me under a microscope. But if you're going to believe that it's metaphysical, like how I believe in spiritual principles, then tell me what governs that realm of metaphysics. How are you even a value decider? No, there's no internal critique of Christianity coming from an atheist. Give me the first basis for the reality that we're in, according to your prophets, according to your leaders. And as I've shared before, I will not change my game and what I'm doing. I don't owe it to you, and you don't owe it to me. You don't have to play my game, and I don't have to play your game. That's why I showed you. Premise 1, if X, then Y. Premise 2, X is true. Conclusion, therefore, Y. You work this out. If a consistent and universal set of rules like logic, morality, and science exists, that's X. And that's an unchanging standard. Then it's going to be grounded in God. Y? He must exist, right? Now, you don't think that my Y is the right Y to why these other things exist? Put your Y in there. You don't get to just keep dropping quarters in the jukebox, asking Christians to dance, because our scripture said somewhere that we owe you a gentle answer. One time, there in the Peter, it also said to not answer a fool according to their folly, lest they think they're wise in their own eyes. Most internet trolls are not here to learn. They're not like the 99%. The 99% that I meet outside of the internet world that actually want to learn and be honest about these questions. Since I just dealt with a physics person the other day, a physicist. You just want to keep trolling and trolling and trolling. Tell me what your why is, and now let's test it to my why. If you don't have one, hush ye the mouthy and be humble. Number 2, God. Number 2, the consistent universal laws do appear in our universe. So if you want to deny number 2, there's no point in even arguing. You don't even believe in logic. Why are we trying to be logical? You don't believe in morality. Why should we be truthful? So if X, then Y. If morals, logic, fundamental things exist in our world, then God exists. Number 2, these things do exist in our world. Laws of logic, fundamental principles, therefore God. If this, then that. That's how it works. As I've showed you before, science does not bring certainty. I've showed that over and over again. Now let me ask you a question. What button do you pick? Because there's only 2 buttons. The law of the excluded middle applies here. There isn't a middle ground. Either objective truth exists because God exists, or objective truth does not exist because God does not exist. And now if objective truth does not exist, according to Russell, there is no intellectual difference between sanity and insanity, because I'm not letting you just throw up some principle somewhere. Tell me where that principle resides. And why is that principle a rational principle? Why isn't it an irrational principle? Your heroes fail every time. Not just these little internet folks. Like you think I'm just challenging the guys on the internet who are getting rocked. No, I'm talking about their daddy's daddy. I'm talking about all your highest levels. Who have I quoted here of your kind that is not a PhD, reputable scholar in your own field? Bertrand Russell, scholar. David Hume, scholar. Alex Rosenburg, scholar. Dr. Rovelli, scholar. Scholar. I'm using your scholars. This is what they say. What do you pick? You as an I exist because God exists, or you as an I don't exist because God doesn't exist? That's Alex Rosenburg. The self, the person, the I inside the body is an illusion with all the others. That comes from his book, The Atheist Guide to Reality. We've read it. How about morals? Morals exist because God exists, or morals don't exist because God doesn't exist. And he said clearly in his book, anything goes. Quoted it to you. Go back and watch the video when I talk about Alex Rosenburg. He says it, anything goes. So how dare you? How dare you come with your objections to the flood, to Sodom and Gomorrah, to anything you don't like? My friend, your daddy's telling you anything goes in this world of might makes right and dust from prior stars. In the world of stardust, anything goes. Stop clutching your pearls and acting like you have a problem with Christianity. And once again, you get zero ability to do an internal critique because you have no ability to do an internal critique. And an internal critique, as I've mentioned before, is someone saying, well, I don't have any justification for morals. I don't have any justification for rationality. I don't have a justification for regularity or anything, but I'll adopt yours as a Christian for argument's sake and then go through the Bible and see if there's anything I don't like. We don't care what you don't like, you ungodly, unspiritual person. The Bible says these things are spiritually discerned. If you don't even know the reason for existence, why would I trust your value judgment on the flood of Noah? I don't care what your value judgment is. You have no deciding factor to give me a trust in you, to give you the value of judging my Bible. What makes you a judge? What makes you know truth from fiction? What makes you know rationality from irrationality? None of your boys know it. None of your best know it. They just assert it and hope it to be true, because they know they can't function in a world where they just simply deny it. So they have to borrow from the Christian worldview. Lastly, what is truth? It's Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life. What does he say? Anyone who builds his life on my words is like a wise man who puts them into practice and builds his house on a rock. Build your house on the words of Jesus. What did Paul say in Colossians? Is that in Christ Jesus are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. 3 hours and 15 minutes. Praise God. I gave it my best, Jesus. I did all that I could, Lord. I pray for him. Pray for him, Jesus. I love you. No one came. It's okay. I'm not here for this. As I said before at the very beginning, I'm not trying to be an internet personality. I made a video prior to this. Some sassy atheists came on, and I made a second video. As I told you from the beginning, if you started watching this, watch it again at double speed. You'll get a lot out of it. Trust me. You'll watch the emotions go up and down. I gave a lot here. But here's what I said at the very beginning. My greatest weakness is to now preach like this or present like this, teach like this, and then to see people underneath the post just put up the most redonkulous things. Let me tell you how you know you're an Oompa Loompa, is if under this video, you put up some Jesus myth stuff. That's how you know you're an Oompa Loompa. Here's how you know you're an Oompa Loompa. If you watch this video and then you try to say I committed logical errors like special pleading, appeals to authority, etc., that's how I know you're an Oompa Loompa. That's how I know it. This is how I know you're an Oompa Loompa. If you come under this video mocking me, calling me Sky, I believe in a Sky Daddy and all of this and that, that's how I know you're an Oompa Loompa. I know you're 100% the fool I should not answer. I know for a fact that you are that fool the Bible tells me not to answer. If you put any kind of redonkulous comment underneath this video, I will know that you are the 100% village idiot of this Facebook and YouTube community. I will know you have the dunce cap on if you do that. No doubt in my mind, because you don't know how to listen. You don't know how to correspond with people. I have literally told you, and I'm going to say this in closing for everybody to understand. If you, and I'm going to put this up here so everybody can get it. If you cannot answer these 4 questions, I want you to think about how I think about you. Okay? So here's how I'm going to help you to think about you, thinking about me. I want you to think about, as a non-believer, as an atheist, what you think about me. Okay? Let's start there. You might think I'm dumb. You might think I'm brainwashed. You might think I just rambled on for 3 hours. You might think all of these things about me. I want you to think about how you think about me, okay? Now I want you to times it by 10, and that's what I think about you. I have so little regard for what you have to say. Unless you answer these questions, I will delete you and block you. I don't care. I only care in this conversation about forwarding these points that I have spent my life as a whole investigating and spent 3 hours presenting to you. Why is there this something rather than another something? And if you're going to come up and say what Alex O'Connor said, because in this something, it is an attribute, a property of itself to exist, because that's what's in its own properties is existing, I have zero things to say back to you because of that. If you cannot understand my disdain for that kind of stupidity, you did not watch this video. Because if you're just going to say a property of the universe is that it can come out of nothing and be organized by itself, I will simply say back to you, I believe that God can be argued in the same absurd ways. If you think you can make an observation an absurdity and I have to believe it, you have zero understanding of what I've done in this video. I have repudiated and despised all the forms of absurdity. I want to know rationally, why is there something, this something rather than another something? Number two, why are you a you and a thinking observer? If you want to assert the redonkulous position that Alex Rosenburg did, that the I is an illusion inside of you, that Daniel Dennett believes that you are just the amalgamation of chemicals that then brings about a emergence of an illusion of a self, but are not really a self, I have zero time to debate with you, because I don't debate with illusionary selves. I don't debate with illusionary persons. Number three, why does science and logic work? If you assert into here the stupidity of Bertrand Russell after he sees how Hume's argument cannot be overcome with empiricism. You don't prove science with science. And your answer to me is what Bertrand Russell said. You just assert the principle of science into your philosophy without proving it in a circular way. I have zero time for you. I would rather shave my head with a cheese grater. And then number four, if you are going to believe that we are a part of a universe that is mindless, chance, matter, in motion, and then you're going to tell me that somehow you can evolve to a truth and a moral that I should keep consistent in this discussion, or you will keep consistent, because that's what evolution brought you. I will say back to you what Alex Rosenburg said: anything goes. Either change your worldview of morals or admit to me nothing now is forbidden. Anything goes. And if you admit to it, as I know you will, if you're going to be honest, but you probably won't be. But if you do, I know you'll have to admit to it at some point. I don't argue with people who have zero explanation for why they should be truthful in a worldview that says there is no morals. And you want to know the secret? Our sister says she's got it. You want to know the secret? Nobody without a theistic belief can ascend these steps. That's why I won't be talking to any of you, because for any of you to ascend these steps in a debate or a discussion, you have to leave behind atheism and agnosticism. Yeah, that's my great conclusion. Like the great conclusion of the book, Alex Rosenburg and the Atheist Guide to Reality, Living Life Without Illusion, his great end to the book is that really there is no you, and that you need to learn how to live without an illusion. Guess what? brothers and sisters, Christians who have watched this, guess what? My ending to this lecture is that really a fool like this is the fool of Proverbs, who you do not owe a debate with, because at this point, it is better for you to spend your time talking to anyone else other than people who have zero rationality about themselves, and yet want to kick, want to put down, and mock the Bible. And that's why the Bible says, do not sit in the seat of the mocker. So I would encourage those who are here, if you do meet the 1% of sassy atheists and agnostics, rebuke them and move on, and show them by your rejection of spending time with them and in endless, pointless debates that you are showing them the very reality of their worldview. Listen to what Dr. Alex Rosenburg says in The Atheist Guide to Reality at the end of his book. If you cannot sleep at night, even after accepting science's answers, remember, science doesn't say anything. He lives in a make-believe world where science talks, and he calls us the foolish ones. An atheist has to literally believe there's a thing called science talking to them. If you can't accept science's answers, remember, there is no science without a scientist. To the persistent questions, you probably just need one more little thing besides the Epicurean detachment. That's the fear of death. Take a Prozac or your favorite serotonin reuptake inhibitor and keep taking them until they kick in. Yeah, that's what your guy says you should go off and do. But you know what? We as Christians have a better way, don't we? That's what we have, a better way than that fool. We have a better way than that, don't we? That's repent, for the kingdom of God is at hand. Confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus Christ is Lord. That's it. And if you're from another religion and you say, Joe, everything you said, I believe as a Muslim, everything you say, I believe as a Hindu, then find great websites online to go discuss those things. Hindus, Muslims, Jewish people, go to God Logic's channel and go debate that you can go book and man, your book and our man, our book to your book, our man to your man. Go for it. Go for it. That's not what I'm here to do. I do make time in these lectures, and I've made about 10, 15 minutes. I don't know exactly, but since I put up my link, let me see. When did I put up my link here? Put it up here? 12:58. It's been up there for 15 minutes now. Take a few more comments. This is just the stupidest idea that God had nothing to do with creation. Exactly. I believe there's more proof that Jesus is real than some explosion created us. I know. Come on. God help them because they know not what they do. That's why we pray for them. The Bible is the word of truth. Job done. Don't need an inhibitor. I just need Jesus. Amen. Yeah. That's the advice of their folks. That's the advice of their folks. That's it. Keep taking drugs. And we're wondering why so many people are suicidal in our generation, more than ever before, putting new stats on the board for suicide. And I said today I wouldn't be in a hurry, so I'm not in a hurry, brothers and sisters. Feel free to listen to this at your own convenience. Let me put this suicide rate at all-time high. Let me just show a few things here that are now the result of a godless society. People turning their back on God. I remember back in my day, people used to say, well, look at the Asian society. Look at these other Europeans, which, by the way, they were built upon the European ones were built upon God, but then they went away. But it was only a matter of time. So they started getting into depression and to the angst of life. And then they used to point to these Asian cultures. Look, they don't have God, but they have prosperity. Yeah, but they have oppression. Look at how miserable their lives are. Look at the problems in Japan right now. They have like a suicide force. I mean, this is nuts. The abortion rates. I mean, look at how immoral they are to keep together their society based on success and honor and shame. And it's killing them from the inside out. After a long, steady decline in national suicide rates, those numbers began steadily ticking up in the late 90s. This is when secularism started becoming more popular, and wokeism and live however you want to your sexuality, and have generally risen ever since, with nearly 50,000 people in the U.S. taking their lives in 2022, up 3% from the previous years. Countries with the highest rate of suicide. South Korea. Now notice that. Look at these cultures that are now turning their backs on God. And South Korea used to have a great Christian population, but now they're turning back on God. Remember these European places? Oh, they're so amazing. They're so amazing. We need to be more like them, less religious. God, guns, and glory in America. We need to be more like these European nations. Look at their suicide rates. Lithuania, Hungary, Estonia, United States, Japan, France, Australia, Germany, Iceland, United Kingdom, Spain, Mexico, Colombia, Luxembourg, Greece. You don't even have which they call the global south here. They make fun of people all the time. Oh, Christianity is only growing in Africa because of the tribalistic religion. They're not as smart as us. It's only growing in those places. Look at how much more healthier lives they have. Look at what European and Western what we would call Western secularism has done to our lives, man. How many people, percentage-wise, how many people in the U.S. are on mental drugs? I was going to put psychotropic drugs in there, but let's just put in mental drugs. 16% of U.S. adults take prescription medication for their medical health. And trust me, I'm not putting down anybody that has the angst of this life, okay? I'm not looking down on you. I'm not a Scientologist, thank God. I'm just saying, look at the angst of our world. Look at it. Look at this. Look at another one, says 20.3% of U.S. adults received mental health treatment in the last 12 months. Is it any wonder that people are so crazy in this world? Come on. What is that? 20% is what? 20 out of 100? Two out of 10? 2 out of 10 people, man, are on their last straw in this world. And don't even get me started, as I've talked about before, Dawkins with Ali, the discussion that they had. Remember, I went through this. Go to the What Do You Believe page to hear this. And she just talks the destruction that she had in her life due to the atheistic worldview and just the pain that it brought her. And then, of course, all the others that are just happening right now in our culture, man. It's just sad. And then all Dawkins brings to her is just mockery, Oh, you couldn't believe this. You couldn't believe that. I would love to have been on that stage and ask him, why do you believe anything, dude? Have you defeated Russell's problem yet, or Hume's problem? Are you just at the point now of just asserting imaginary principles of science into your world so that they can work? Or like with Expelled, about how these Christian or theist scientists were being kicked out of their universities. And yet Dawkins was there going, hey, well, I can believe in aliens. I can believe in all this. Yeah, you can believe in any stupid theory you want, but you say God did it, and now you get in trouble. University doesn't want you there. You still believe in an alien seeding this planet like Prometheus and the alien saga of my friend? Mocking this woman. When she was following your worldview, she had no peace. Yet this is the world that we live in. And now you see even those like Sam Harris and those atheists renouncing wokeism as they see that their ungodliness has led to a world that has no values. You can listen to him on wokeism. I'm not saying that he's the best example in the whole world, but he's not happy with how his world came about. And I like the way David Wood addresses this when he talks about how, these people thought, we're just going to bring in atheism and then we'll bring in a utopia. Look at the last 10 years, especially the last 5 years with COVID and BLM. These guys are afraid of their own freedoms being taken from. They don't want socialism, some of these older atheists. And yet, once again, while you were mocking God, thinking that you lived in a vacuum, something filled its space, didn't it? You were mocking God and you thought it would all just go away and we'd all live in some utopia. Nope. You're going to deal with people who don't know their gender and don't want you telling them. You're going to deal with people who would rather burn down a city than get a job. You're going to deal with people who would rather abort their children than have children. And you know what? That's going to lead to Islam taking over like it has in Europe right now because of their birth rates. So look what happened to secular Europe. Islam said, we'll come right in and conquer you. Yeah, doesn't work, does it? Because out of all that you have done, let's go here to the statistic. Out of all that they have done, what really is the rate of unbelief in this world? What really is the rate of unbelief? What is the rate of atheism in the world? After all that they said and did, where are they at? Yeah, 7 to 9%. Look at that. And then they're saying China has some of the highest percentages, and that's why it's hard to tell. But notice, what about the massive growth rate of Christianity in China? China's seen one of the most massive Christian growth rates right now, and it has been one of the largest secular nations. Yeah, look at this. Yep. Now they're saying there's estimated of this many believers in China, and there could be over 247, potentially overturning it from being one of the most largest secular nations in the world. As we just saw here with the numbers. Look at this. Countries like China have the highest percentage of 90% of its population identifying as atheist. And yet now China is seeing one of the highest rates of Christianity. Praise God. Yeah, our sister here is talking about the borders. Yeah, it's just people who are being provocateurs, trying to bring down collapse to our nation. Not saying that I believe in everything that comes across conservatism. Conservatism. Thank you, Jesus. I get paid to talk for a living, and I can barely talk. I get paid to write for a living, and I can barely spell. If that doesn't give you hope for what God can do in somebody's life. Yeah, that's what's happening in our world today. And so I'm going to end this with a prayer and maybe a nice little hymn. Father, I thank you for everyone who joined, anyone who gets the good out of this. I pray for all the rebukes that came towards the unbelievers to remain and for their hearts to be convicted, for them to come back home, those who have deconverted, to repent of their sins. And Lord, we pray for this nation, nations of the world, that they'll experience revival. And that, Father, you will live in us, be real in us, transform our lives. May we know and love you in all that we do. Help us to love even those who disagree, and give me wisdom on how to move forward with the chats below these videos, Lord. Father, in your name I pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Wanted to share this before. If you wanted to write me, because I might take off the comments, you can just write us here, but answer those 4 questions. Otherwise, no, we love you. We send you to other channels to play other games, but this is what we're going to do. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.